And we are up.
Yay!
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
I don't think anybody's here yet, but hello. I'm also loopy at the beginning of the laugh, just like, hello to the people who are not here, but hopefully will be at some point, and welcome to the very first Her-storyathon live show of the month. Melina! Yay!
Hi.
Hello, dear. Lovely to have you.
Yes,
and
for sure.
today we are basically going to be having a big gush fest, probably a few rants along the way about history and our favourite women of history and podcasts and films and all those different things that we love
And
very
obviously
much.
books, since booktube.
You know. Those two. Yeah. But yes, it is lovely to have you with me. And
Yes.
it's very exciting. This is actually our first time like properly talking to each other, not in person,
Yes.
but face to face.
It's close enough in this like COVID world. This is a lot of interactions, but yeah, I feel like it was really funny because I've been watching Charlotte's videos forever. And I think I like in the last like 5-6 months, like I've been like the two of us have been back and forth on comments and like on Instagram, but I've been watching your videos for ages before then. So I was a Charlotte fan.
And I'm the Brittany fan. So no, it's really nice to be able to actually talk off the comments, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very excited when you messaged me about doing this reading month. Just like, yes, all the things that I love, history and women of history. Haha.
It's just like crazy idea, but are you interested?
Just like, yes, I'm in, please. No, it's I don't think he could have designed a better readathon for me.
Hi, Katie.
Oh, no, it's lovely. So since we are here for the purposes of the Her-storyathon, I thought we would kick things off by just having a little bit of a check-in on how we're doing, anything that you're reading right now, anything you've finished. I know we're quite early in the month, and what's coming up for the Her-storyathon in your world.
Yeah, so funny enough, I think we both started with the same book. So I started with Gentleman Jack.
I do actually
by
have
Angela Steidel.
this one I made earlier.
Your copy is so much prettier than mine.
Do you know what? I actually found it in a charity shop just near where I work.
Really?
And it's the first time I had been to this charity shop. It was when I just started working in Oxford, and it was in the window, and I was like, must go, buy, grab, go. So it wasn't actually that much money, which was it was $3.99, which is quite steep for a charity shop, but very good for the actual book itself.
Yeah, no. So I'm like a third of the way into this right now. I've been like reading it very leisurely because it's really interesting, but I do feel like some of the writing is a little bit dense. But it's been really fascinating. So I'm working my way through this. And I'm finishing up yes, they are always better. It's why I get some of my books from the UK. It's like I will wait the 10 days for it to ship here.
I will say though, when the US has a good one, it is very, very good. Like there are a couple of things. Home Fire by Camilla Shamsi. I know that the UK cover is better in terms of like symbolism of the actual book, but I thought the actual cover of the US was really pretty and it was very colourful. So I was like, I want that. Hello, Book Depository, mine.
Yeah.
Can be a bit of a mixed bag. Sorry, I'll let you.
No, so I'm making my way through this, and I'm finishing up actually an audiobook that's not related to Her-storyathon, but it's
Mhm.
related to Melena's Bronte along. So I'm reading Agnes Grey for that. But I think once I finish that, which I should probably finish in the next day or two, I'm gonna start listening to the audiobook A Well-Behaved Woman, which is on Alva Vanderbilt.
Oh,
So
cool.
it's a novel. I'm leaning hard into like the Gilded Age fanaticism over here. So I was like, this seems perfect because the Russells are based on the Vanderbilts from what I've read. So that'll be my next book that I pick up for her storyathon.
Ah, I do definitely need to. My mum is taping the Gilded Age for me, so when I go back in a
Oh,
couple of
nice.
weeks, I'll be on that because I feel like I don't
Yeah,
know that much about
yeah,
the time. So this is why we like TV shows and films, is
yeah,
that they get a nice little entry in. Um,
yeah, for sure.
I also should put in. I'm throwing in a sneaky plug for this because I actually am going to be on the live show for Agnes
Oh,
Grey
yay! This is
because
one of the few
Melina.
Brontes I hadn't read yet, so I'm very excited. I'm about a quarter of the way through right now, I think.
I think it's very underrated. I think Anne generally is very underrated as
I
one
do
of the
too.
six. But no, I read it a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh, this is really sweet, and nobody talks about it. And I think maybe just because it is so short, maybe people forget about
Mhm.
it. It's not like this
Yeah,
big sweeping story, but I
yeah.
like it.
No.
Now I'm looking
Yes,
forward to.
I would agree. I would agree. I'm not a huge American history person at all. Um, but the Gilded Age, especially because for me it's like New York City. Like it's home basically. So there's always been that attachment to it. But I mean, you see all of these Gilded Age mansions just walking around like Central Park and things like
Mm,
that. And so knowing the families who lived in it and like the history of that is really interesting to me. But yeah, I'm not a
mm,
huge American history fan on the whole. I definitely skew more towards European history than anything else.
mm. That is the same for me. Um, and it is because it is. I'm like, so close-minded. Just stay with my own things. I'm feeling now. You're reading because we're both reading this, and this for
Yeah.
anybody who doesn't know, Gentleman Jack is about the life of Anne Lister, who was a landowner in just outside of Halifax, and Halifax was my hometown. I don't live there right now, but it's where I grew up. And I feel like because you're reading something that is related to my hometown, I feel like I definitely should try and branch out and find something that's like New York based. Because I
No.
don't think I've got anything currently on the docket for New York, um, but that'd be quite nice. Oh, but no, I finished Gentleman Jack a couple of days ago, and it was like because
Oh,
I've
good.
and I had a very good time with it. I found her she's a very interesting character, and she's like such an icon of my hometown, but she's
Mhm.
also like I feel like I would hate her if I knew her in real life. I feel like
Probably.
we wouldn't get on, even though she's very uh, she's like a very aspirational person in a lot of ways in terms of like her confidence in herself,
Mhm.
but also I feel like politically we would not get on because she is very
Yeah.
conservative and very much like just for herself and not really for her workers. I'm like, oh, I don't feel good things about that, Anne. Um,
No.
and I don't know, just the way I think she talks about Byron. I feel like she does kind of model herself in terms of
Yeah.
her conquests on Byron. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that, Anne.
Yeah.
I did,
It's
but I did my work experience there, and just
oh, really?
I'm very like I've been quite infused in her life and where she grew up. So I
Yeah.
still find her fascinating.
I mean, she's one of these characters that, like, the first time I'd ever heard of her was when they started promoting the TV show,
Mm.
which, like, I feel like that TV show, like, appeared and then disappeared. Like,
Mm.
everyone made a big fuss of it right as it was premiering, and then I never heard anything about it ever again. It's not one of those that I even, like, see on repeats or
No.
anything. So she's, like, for me, completely new historical figure for me to be learning about, because I only knew, like, the very basics, but just reading this book, I'm just like, she's basically Casanova if Casanova were a Regency woman,
Yeah.
because I'm just like, she can basically get any woman that
Anyone.
she sets her, like, sights on, and I'm just like, "How? How does this work?" I'm just like, the, like, magnetism because of her confidence and everything must be through the roof, but
Mm.
it's just been fascinating so far, to hear about to start hearing about the different ways that she's, like, that she's getting to travel and that she's, like, coming into land ownership herself as a woman during this time period. So it's been a really fun time. I am interested in seeing if I can find the TV show after I've read the book to actually watch it and see, like, how true to the book they stayed. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, and they actually filmed it. Actually filmed a lot of bits at Shibden Hall because they did shut
Oh,
down
really?
for filming. And because the time that I was there, it was that interim between they'd finished filming and they were getting ready to reopen, and the show was about to come out. So it was like a very exciting
Oh,
time
okay.
because they weren't sure how it was going to do in terms of like were people actually going to watch it? Were they going to get a lot of pickup in tourism? And they actually did. They had so much
Oh,
tourism that
wow.
summer of people coming from all around the world to be like, "Ooh, I've seen this on TV." And I had a great moment of just being like, "I've been in that room. I organised the library in that room."
'Cause that is what we all care about. I
Well,
think it
that was
might be
also
on
that
Hulu.
was what my job was to reorganise their
Organize the
library. So it was a fantastic time.
that would be so
uh,
much fun.
Good fun. It was very good fun. I also, in terms of history fun books, I've been a very good girl, and I just finished
You
our
finished
book.
it
I
already?
finished it this morning. I was on a roll, and I was just like, I've got like 100 pages left. Let's just keep going. So I'm worried now that I'm going to get to our live show for the book, and I'm going to have completely forgotten everything because it is a proper like whistle stop tour of all of these different women through the past 2 centuries. And a lot of it is stuff that I know, but I'm like, will I remember like
Mhm.
how she told it? But she's a very as a writer, I think she's a very interesting personality, and she puts a
Mm.
lot of her personality into the book.
Oh, well, that's
So
good.
I'm excited to see what you think and what anybody else who's reading it thinks.
Yeah.
Yay!
I'm pretty impressed because I feel like I've seen a lot of people have already started it,
Mm,
and so I'm now feeling like the, like, peer pressure that I'm like, "I need to start this book," whereas usually it's like, because I have a live show, I'm like, "Let me wait until the absolute last moment so I don't
mm.
forget anything," but now I'm like, "Okay, I think I need to at least start it."
I've got like 3 different like group books that I need to read this month alongside like the other herstory books that I want to read. So I've got this,
Mhm.
I've got Peter Pan, which I'm doing for my book club with Shannon and Karis, and then
Mhm.
Agnes Grey for the Bronte along. Um, hello.
Hi.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I feel like from from finishing it, there are some characters that I didn't know a lot about, and some that I
Mhm.
hadn't heard about before, but like a lot where I was like, oh yes, this person,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's interesting because it reminds me. I feel like there are some moments with some figures where you're going to be like, oh, this person, we're going to talk about Margaret Thatcher again, but you know that she's a very important person to talk about if you are going to talk about like
Right.
women's place in history. But you're also like, but she is very critical of Margaret Thatcher. So I'm like, good, okay, good.
Yeah,
At least
good.
we
Okay, that's
know
allowed then.
it's allowed.
You can be critical of
But
Maggie.
assessing her as a figure in like in women's history, but also her pitfalls and where she was not a great person, which
Yeah.
and how she didn't really like hold up other women on her way up.
No.
So and she does that with other figures. Like she talks about sorry, I'm just gonna basically spoiling things. She talks about like, could we see
You're not.
like somebody like Ivanka Trump? I can't say words. Ivanka Trump. Could she be like another nepotism politics child and end up being the first female president? And I was like, oh please God no. But this was written, I think, 2019, 2020. So,
Yeah.
so it doesn't have the perspective of the past couple of years, which I think is interesting. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I'm interested to start it because the only things I've read by Rosalind Miles have been her fiction, and that was, like, years ago. That I even think the books that I read by her are no longer, like, in print, like, they're out of print. So I'm kind of interested to see how her voice, if I remember enough of it to say, like, "Oh, this is similar," or if it feels completely different.
Yeah. What fiction had you?
She had a trilogy on, like, it was an Arthurian legend trilogy, but it was, like, from the perspective of Guinevere. So,
Oh,
I remember reading that. I was probably, like, 12, 13 at the time, but I devoured all 3 of those books because I loved Arthurian legend, I still do. But it was just interesting for me at the time to read it from a female perspective because I feel like a lot of the times the Arthurian legend is from, like, Lancelot or Arthur or Merlin, so it felt different. But I don't even think those books are still in print, at least not in the US.
yeah. I was trying to set when I was searching around for this one, because the added difficulty of it having a completely different title and trying to work out
Yeah.
which one, because she has a book that is called that I think is called like The Women's History of the World, but it's a completely different book in the UK to
Oh,
this one
really?
and the one that we're both reading. So it didn't
Oh.
make things easy, and it looked like that original People's History was almost out of print. If it wasn't, it looked like it was quite hard to get your
Yeah.
hands on it. So
Yeah.
no, it's interesting. But had a good time with it. We'll try and make sure I don't forget anything before we're chatting about it in a few weeks' time.
Mhm.
And then my
For
last
sure.
thing, my very last thing is I am currently partway through the woman they could not silence by Kate Moore, off the
Ooh,
reading name. This is
yes.
about Elizabeth Packard, who was basically sent off to a mental asylum by her husband for being too rowdy in his eyes. No, she was like very much like campaigning at home for like a better place in for women's place in the home and being able to like speak out publicly, and he did not like that. And so she was
No.
in the asylum and finding out how many other women had the exact same story. Is my understanding of this. It's a figure who what like I knew the name of but didn't know a lot about in terms of
Mhm.
her biography. So I'm enjoying this so far, even though it's like very sad to think about. And I'm only about 77 pages in, but this has been my bus to work book.
Right, right.
And I'm quite enjoying that so far. And I really loved the Radium Girls when I read that last year, and I think her
Yeah.
voice comes through that. It's very it feels very narrative like.
Oh,
Like
that's good.
it could be a novel. In the way that she tells it, very atmospheric, which I like.
Yeah. I'm really interested in reading that one. I got the audiobook through Libby, and,
Mhm.
um, and I started listening to it, but it was right at the end of the year, and it was, like, around the holidays, so I feel like I was only getting to, like, listen to, like, a few minutes at a time, so the narrative just felt really broken up to me, and I was like, "Let me just return this and actually read it like it's meant to be read instead of, like,
Mhm.
taking, like listening to 30 minutes and then taking, like, a 5-day break from it because I was doing
Yeah.
other things." So, I'm really interested in it partly because, like, I my thesis in school, I did a lot of research on, especially in literature, the way that madness and like the asylum were often used and like weaponized against women
Mm.
throughout history, and how that was indicative of what was going on within society at the time. So I have a lot of like background in it, especially from the like Victorian era specifically.
Mm.
So I'm like, yes, I want to get to that, but I do think it's one of those books that I need to make sure I'm not trying to read like 4 or 5 different things at the same time, because otherwise I won't get the same level of enjoyment from it, because I loved Radium Girls. I think I read it in 2020, and I think it was one of my favorite books of the year.
I think it's this one's probably set to do what the Radium Girls did, where I was just like running around my house, just like, can you believe this? Can you believe that these girls were treated this way? and
like the
and
horror.
everybody else around me just being like, Charlotte, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm not okay. It's the same feeling I have for Empress
No.
Matilda, which we'll come on to later, but that same like
Yes.
indignation. Lena is reading Love and Fury by Samantha Silva. I have read that. This was one of my January books, and I loved this. Have you read Love and Fury?
I haven't. I've seen this book though, and I feel like several people have mentioned trying to read it for Her-storyathon, and now I'm like, I
Yeah,
must add this to my like TBR ASAP, because it, from what everyone said, they've really enjoyed it.
yeah, it's lovely, and it's a really good one if you've read Romantic Outlaws by Charlotte
Which I
Gordon, which
have.
is like
I haven't.
the jewel bell.
It's over.
Yay! So a lot of it will be very familiar, but
Yeah.
it's basically it kind of alternates timelines where you start off and it's Mary Wollstonecraft. My housemates are coming. Pop the headphones in. It's Mary Wollstonecraft just as she's given birth to the little girl who will become Mary Shelley, and and she's about to give birth. She is in with the midwife, and she's kind of telling her daughter like her life story. It's kind of like flashing between that. So it
You're sounding a little quiet at the moment. Can you make sure it's plugged in?
How are we now?
Perfect. Perfect.
Where was I? So yeah, so she is alternating between telling her life story in one chapter and then it flashing to the present day of her giving birth, and those 10 days or like the 2 weeks around her giving birth and then being sick and dying, and yeah, and it's so lovely, but also heartbreaking, and it goes through like her entire life, and it's only about 350 pages, so it is like very like
so it's not long.
But so the feeling that I had was, oh, I want even more of this, which I don't think is a bad feeling to have about a book, is if you wish it was longer. So no, I had a very good time with it and wanted to have a little weep. So yeah, I'm very excited for you, Melina, to be reading that.
I love a good sad book.
Sorry, I had just noticed Kieran has descended.
Hi there.
You know. Haha. So I think it'll be wrap up part 1, because I only just put up. I was very bad and I took February off, so I still have a bunch of wrap up to pop into. Into the channel. It's going to be basically I think my schedule is going to be Tuesdays are going to be something like Women's History Month related. This time around, it's actually this Tuesday. It's going to be about the Women's Prize for Fiction. So,
good.
And then a wrap up on a Friday, because I've got a lot to catch up.
Yeah.
But yes. So those are our little catch up on Her-storyathon. That we can talk about next reads a little later on. Something that had popped up for us to chat about was the origins of us being history enthusiasts and where it all
all came from.
Yes.
Where did we start? What did we study? That kind of thing.
Yes.
I feel like I am an interviewer, just being like, where did your inspiration come from?
It's really funny. Do you want to go first?
Oh, right. Yeah. Like,
so reluctant.
I know. It's because I'm also like not 100% sure. Because it was all like very much based around school and what we were learning. And I know, but I'm also like very critical about like the history education at school, because I don't think we had a lot of it. I think my teachers were great, but I just think we covered the same things over and over again. I think that's just curriculum issues rather than them.
Yeah.
A lot of World War II, so much World War II.
Yeah.
I feel like in the UK, you either learn a lot about the Tudors or a lot about the World Wars, and it's like one or the other, and then not a lot around that. And early modern history, nothing aside from Tudors if you do them. So mine was a lot of World War II. But no, I remember like year 6, we would have on Fridays, we would have history in the morning and then art in the afternoon, and that was our routine. And always whatever we were doing in art was based around what we were doing in history, and we were doing about like the Blitz and evacuation of children, and I found that so interesting, just to think about. And it was like the first time of seeing like young children, especially in history, and feeling like I could relate to something, and to imagine what they were going through. And then I think I kind of, because my parents weren't like very big in terms of like going to museums or that kind of thing, so it wasn't like a constant time looking at the local history. And like I think I've mentioned in the past, I've been very, very bad about getting into my local history, apart from in the last like couple of years, which is silly because like I live in England. There is so much. There is so much.
There is so much. I love whenever I'm in the UK. Love it. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'm like thinking like with our curriculum with schools, I feel like we spend so much time on like the American Revolution and then the Civil War, and then you spend very little time like on anything more modern than that. Like World War II, we kind of rush through. Like, you get like the Cliff Notes version of it, and then it's like, okay, we're now in the 80s and Reagan, and then it's like, okay, now school's over. It's like, great. So that's really funny that like that it varies so differently.
No, I mean, certain bits we had, like we did do when I was in 6th form, which is when you can drop subjects and you only have to take like 4 subjects. So it's very much like concentrated learning. Then we started doing some medieval history, but we hadn't done any medieval history up until that point when we were 16, since we were 11 and learning about 66 and the Norman invasion. And it was like, oh, there's like a very long stretch of time that we just had no basis in, which just feels a bit wild, really. So we did like, I remember when we were 16, we did like the Crusades and we did the 100 Years' War. And only the bits that look good for England, a lot of Agincourt. Just be like, yay, we beat the French at something. And it's like, yeah, though, did we?
Oh, Agincourt.
She's like, right past Henry VI. Don't talk about him. But no. But I was really into, I got really into it during like my GCSEs. So I would have been like 14, 15. And I would like read out my textbook to my mum in the car, who probably thought like, I don't want to learn about World War II, Charlotte. I really don't. But I was just like, can you believe this? Can you believe all of these things? I think it's especially like we were learning about like the rise of Nazism, and I was just like, can you believe it? How terrible! Like all this ideology and what it led to. And she was like, yes, Charlotte, very, very bad. Like, no, like enthusiasm in trying to drag my mum along for the ride, and she was like, maybe you should do history, Charlotte. It's like, maybe you should teach it. It's like, no, I definitely couldn't do that. And yeah, so ended up taking it to and studying it at uni. And then I had a couple of years out from uni and realized how much I missed it, because I don't feel like I did the best that I could have done at my BA. And then went back and did public history, and had a fantastic time doing that as a master's. And now basically want to fling history books at everybody, which is basically what I want my channel to become.
And I love when you fling history books in our direction, especially because I feel like we, like the two of us, we are such history like fangirls, but we do have preferences for different time periods. So I know I can always go to you for like early modern, and you're gonna have some A++ like recommendations. So it's nice that there's someone who has like, who is as passionate about history as I am, who also like is interested in another area of history that might not be one that I gravitate towards on my own. So that's always really, really nice. But I'm trying to think. I mean, it's one of those things too where I feel like I just always was interested in history. And I think that was partly because my mom is English. She was born in London. And so I grew up with the history that she loved, which she definitely was obsessed with the Tudor period. So like Henry VIII was like bedtime stories for me, like before I was like in kindergarten. Like like I could tell you all about the different wives and how they died and everything. And so from really early on, I was just really fascinated by these stories. And like she would tell me about like, oh, how she would like, she'd go to the Tower of London as a kid, and she remembered like seeing the block for beheadings. Like she remembered that vividly as a child. And so like she would tell me all about that. And so I just grew up with someone who was really into history, kind of sharing the history with me and getting me really amped up for it. And I don't think I really like, I was always reading it. Like when I was picking up books for myself, a lot of the books that I read as a kid were historical fiction. But I don't think I really got into history, like studying it, probably until like middle school, because a lot of what you studied here in New York up until you probably got to middle school was like local or American history, which I already mentioned I'm not hugely a fan of. So I was kind of like, this is boring. I felt like most of the class was like, oh yes, we're going to talk about this Supreme Court case and what it changed. Or like my area where I live was a big area for the American Revolution. So it's like, oh yes, we're going to go to this little red schoolhouse where like George Washington spent 5 seconds, and we're going to gush about it. And then we're going to go to this other place where they might have a few like musket balls that they found when they were like digging up the house. And it was like, this is not fun. But it was once I got to like middle school and we started doing like more world history, which world history really was, okay, let's spend like 5% of the time talking about like Asia, Africa, Latin America, and let's spend the other 95% of the time on Europe. That was when I started getting really interested in history, because European history was what I ended up going to school for. And I double majored in English and history, but both of them were primarily focused on Europe. With my English, it was Victorian England and Victorian literature. But with my history, it ended up being a lot of Russia, because I basically fangirled this one professor, and that was her specialty. So basically every semester I was taking 2 or 3 of her classes, and they were all be like focused on like Imperial Russia, Russian intelligentsia, like the history of terrorism. Like it just all came back to Russia. So that ended up being what I really focused on in the end. And to your point, now I just fling a bunch of history books and historical fiction books at people on my channel.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I feel like I feel like I wasn't like led to history by any particular person. I feel like I just kind of stumbled in, was like, this is cool. Let's just try and work my way around here. And I feel like I'm still very much on like catch up mode. Like even though I have done like my BA and my MA, I still feel like there's so much that I don't know, especially when it comes to world history, and so much that I want to dig into. But there's so much of it.
There's like, so much of it.
I'll go into the bookshop, into the history section, and the history section is only, fairly small compared to the rest of the bookshop, but it's like, oh, wow, there is no way that I could cover like even a tenth of what is here. It feels like. It's just so much, and it's very overwhelming, but it's kind of fun to kind of piece together what you can. But I love it a lot, and I like being able to talk about it with other people. See, I feel like
I'm trying to think. Maybe there's a lot of Civil War just in general.
I feel like that's what pops up. Civil War and Revolutionary War is what pops up in like pop culture things. I feel like as a British person, my American history education comes from Hamilton, and then anything that was brought up on the Disney Channel.
Yes.
Which,
it's
so like the odd like 7 years ago, and I don't really understand, and I didn't really understand the context of it, but I was like, yes, 7 years ago, and just feel like, just like names, and then just trying to fill in the gaps around that.
Yeah, it's really weird. I feel like a lot of the like American history courses, it's like you get through to maybe the very beginning of the 20th century, maybe, if you have like a really thorough teacher. But then everything else, it's just kind of brushed over. Like, oh yes, you're going to hear about World War I. You're going to hear that it led to World War II. You're going to talk about World War II in the context of like the Americans trying to avoid being in the war, then Pearl Harbor. And then all of a sudden we're in the war, and then the war is won, and yay, it's because the Americans joined the war that the war ended. Like, and then it's like, okay, now the Cold War starts and nothing. Like you don't cover anything.
When you have like the American entrance into the war on our side, it's like, and then they finally showed up, for God's sake.
Yeah, it's like, yay, we joined, and like, that's why we won.
Doing fine. We were doing fine. We were not doing fine.
So it's funny to hear the different perspectives, but I think that's a lot of why I enjoy reading the history books, because like, yes, they're all covering, like when you read books on like the wars, they're covering the same subject matter, but depending on when the book was written, who the book was written by, like the perspectives are very different, and like there's so much that is like continuing to be assessed and developed in sort of the historical context as time goes by. So that's always really interesting.
I do think
that is quite a gap.
Melina.
That is a huge jump.
We've actually sneaky thing for the Fall 22 list of Princeton University Press. We're actually publishing a book that is going to be like the year 1000 to 1800 in the Netherlands. And I'm going to be doing the UK publicity for that. So anyone wants to pick that up?
That's exciting.
And I just want to say I'm very impressed to the dedication here for allowing me to publish it.
Yeah.
It must be you. It's people coming to see your lovely face.
No, it's fun. But yeah, Katie was like 3 hours behind me, so that's definitely alarm clock time. Unless you're like me and wake up at 5 every day, but I am a weirdo that way.
Even on weekends?
Yeah, even on weekends. What? Like today was sleeping in for me because I woke up at 6:30 and I was like, oh wow. Like what happened?
I wish I had that dedication. Like, I wish I had that ability, to be honest. No,
I don't even know why it's a thing. I don't set alarms. I just wake up the same time every day.
Wow.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, I'm
I
getting
don't
slowly to
recommend
the
it.
point where I do wake up around the time that I need to be up to get ready for work. It's definitely not a natural occurring thing. And I think if it was any earlier, I'd just die, just wilt.
No.
No. No. I was going to say we had one of the notes was about what we studied. So you did a lot of your European and Russian history. I feel like I completely, because like I say, we didn't study the Tudors at all at school. I think maybe we had like a couple of weeks on it in year 8, which was not a lot. Just like
right.
He had 6 wives, he had 2 daughters and a son. We didn't learn anything about Edward. Not a thing.
Oh, Edward. Edward gets
Mary, just like over. Mary bad, Elizabeth good. That's the Tudors. Nothing for Henry VII. Henry VII always gets like shunted to the side.
Yeah.
And then like
I'm trying to think. We definitely didn't cover Henry VII.
No. Which is
not at all.
This is fair. This is absolutely fair.
Subscribe to Charlotte's channel right now because she's awesome.
Oh, I would watch a live show for you and not for me, to be honest.
Oh no. We're sharing the love. Anyone who's not subscribed to Charlotte and is here because me, definitely subscribe because she has fantastic recommendations.
And vice versa, but I don't know who that's going to be.
No, it's really fun. Also, Charlotte is such a like musical theater person, which I love because I'm like a closet musical theater person. Like I did the costumes.
I know. That'll be definitely a topic of discussion. It's going to have to be. It's like history musicals because that's what I did my dissertation on.
Oh really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Should I just do it now? Should I just have my spiel about this now? Okay. So for my masters, obviously like Hamilton. I started my masters in 2018. So Hamilton had already been out. There'd been a lot of talk about it already, and like a lot of academic discussion on it, but I was like very adamant that somewhere my dissertation has to feature Hamilton. And when I brought that to my tutor, he was just like, why? And I was like, we just got to do it. It's like, but so many people have spoken about Hamilton, Charlotte. I was like, I don't care, I'm doing it anyway. He's like, well, if you can find like an interesting way into it, then fine, but there's so much. And when you go on to like Google Scholar and type in Hamilton and history, a lot shows up, probably like even more so now that the Disney Plus film has come out, because it's just like you've got better access to it now. If only I'd had that when I was doing my writing, but no. But no, so my way into it was I'd gone to see Six the Musical, which had just come out, and Come From Away, which had also just come out in the UK. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting because I can see lots of different parallels between the way that these musicals like discuss their history. Because they do, because I feel like especially Six and Hamilton are very conscious of the fact that history exists and the way that they are being told, how these different figures are being told, and how we tell that history. It's very consciously done in the shows, and this concept of like rewriting it and like turning different characters into certain archetypes of like villain and hero, and how it's a bit more complex than that. And I thought that was really interesting. And then you've got Come From Away, which is completely made up from like oral testimony that the show writers actually compiled themselves when it was like the 10th anniversary of 9/11, going over to Gander and compiling all these stories and then turning it into a musical. And I thought that's really interesting. Like that's something that you would expect like an oral historian to do, and it would, you know, turn into a book or into a thesis. But their way of expressing that has been as a musical. how interesting. So it was basically a lot of like digging into those different things and then looking back at shows like Les Mis or Miss Saigon, which tackle like historical events, but aren't really, I wouldn't say that they're that interested in the topic
In
of
the
how we
history.
tell history. It's just, here's a thing that happened, and let's have like a nice story around it, rather than what does this mean? How is the way that we're telling it
That's so
affecting
fascinating.
like consciousness and stuff like that? And yeah, I had a very good time doing that, and everybody had told me do not do it on musicals, because then you're going to end up hating all of them. But actually the opposite ended up being true, because I'm 100% the kind of person who, like, if I love something, I will listen to it like 50 times and I won't get bored.
Oh, me too. Me too.
I understand how people like have that like oversaturation makes them hate it, but no, I'm the opposite. And like I've been to see them all again like twice over, and I'm still like, more please. you know, there's that scene in The Simpsons where Barney's just like, hook it to my veins. That is me with all of these musicals. Just make it me.
Oh my god, that's
no, iconic. I just think it's really interesting. I think the stage is a really interesting place for these kind of conversations, and it's not perfect. None of these shows are perfect, and there's so much that you can criticize Hamilton and Six especially for, because Six was like, it's interesting the conversations they were able to get in how quickly the show was made, because it was like 2 Cambridge students who just kind of cobbled it together for the Edinburgh Fringe. They consulted like maybe 1 or 2 books and a documentary, and then it was like show. And it's great, and it focuses on so much, but there's so much that is missing from it, or like aspects that aren't quite right, but it still brought so many people into learning about Tudor history that I'm like, I'm and it's so fun. it's
I think it only opened here recently.
Yeah, well, it was meant to. I think the day that Broadway went down for COVID, was when
it was meant to open.
They were meant to open, which I think is so sad. But hopefully people are. Please flock to it, because it is a very, very fun show, and
I really want to see it.
Criticize for it is a very good time, and I think it's opening so many conversations. Oh, no, don't want that.
That's a bot.
Hey, I've never had bots on my lives before. The part of me is like, oh, and then another part is like, oh, bots. Not had that before.
No, it's really funny because my thesis too was on the stage, but not from a musical perspective. I was looking at Tennessee Williams, who is my favorite playwright, and I was looking at him and making a case for him being a female Gothic writer through the course of his different work. So I was like focusing on several of his plays and looking at how it represented the female body, especially with like disfigurement and what that looked like, or like madness in air quotes and what that looked like, as well as just sort of the different ways that like certain Gothic tropes, like the haunted house or that sort of thing, became what it did in the course of his works, because he was definitely like, I think he's considered a Gothic writer, but I made like this case for how his work reflected the ideas and cultural sort of implications of these Gothic tropes through his works, even though he was writing in the 20th century for the stage. So I read all of his plays. There's several of them that I've like lived for the adaptations of them, probably watched them a million times at this point, but like saw several of them on the stage as well. So I totally get you, where it was like, no, I can't get enough Tennessee Williams at all. I'm just going to read and watch everything of his that comes out, and I'm quite happy with that. But it's interesting that we both ended up writing these big like research papers on the stage in different capacities.
I do need to get more into straight plays. That's just making me think, because barely a thing that was apart from Shakespeare, I feel like that was barely a thing that we covered at school.
We covered some.
It's a lot of, and like I've never like acted in any straight plays either, because I'm just like, singing is my crutch. That's what I know I can do. Can I act? I don't know.
You have a lovely singing voice.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's one of those things where I'm just like, I'm like, I know I'm not terrible, and I want to share it more. So I need to just like cough up the courage to actually film stuff and put it out. But one day when I'm not in a house that has a shared wall that young children can hear.
Yes. Oh geez. Yeah.
Hey. Okay. A question that we had earlier from Rosie, the lovely Rosie, was your first history book, fiction or non-fiction, that you remember loving as a kid. I thought that would tie in quite nicely to the question of how we got into history.
Yeah.
So yeah, just chatting about any early books that you can remember that were history related. I had quite a hard time trying to think of stuff.
It's funny because like, and Katie can speak to this too, because she actually made it like a project of hers, but the Royal Diaries book series, that was like the first, I think, historical fiction that I really remember reading, because they're quite accessible. I don't know what like age level they would be considered. They're probably like middle grade by whatever rubric we're using now. But the first one that I remember was Keulani, which was the like last princess of Hawaii. And I vividly remember like borrowing that book from the library, reading it, and then like making my mother buy it from like Barnes and Nobles or Borders. And I had that book for years. I probably read it several times. But it was just so fascinating because the whole Royal Diaries series, they're like your age when I was reading them. So it was, to me, it was kind of like how you were talking about like with World War II, when you first started relating to it because you were hearing about the children who were being like evacuated. This was like history that it was like, oh yeah, it's this girl that's my age going through this crazy stuff, and it's written as a little diary. But those were like the first like historical fiction books that I remember reading. I don't know what would be considered the first like actual history book. But I have a feeling I was probably older by the time I picked up like an actual history book itself. But the Royal Diaries series for sure, because I know I read the Isabel one, or Isabella. I know I read the Mary Queen of Scots one for sure. Eleanor of Aquitaine. So there were several, but the Keulani, the last princess of Hawaii, was the one that I think really got me hooked on that entire series.
I think I can't even remember what it would have been called, but it was basically a book, just a little hardback picture book that was meant to be like one location and going from like prehistoric to present day, and then you turn a page and each time the landscape would change and there'd be like some sort of new buildings or new technology, and each time you pop, you're getting closer to, I think it would have been 2000 where it ended. And I remember finding that really interesting, and I don't know why, because that's not even the kind of thing that I'm interested in, is like landscapes and how they've changed over time. But it's just like, oh, where I live has not always looked like this. How fascinating.
Yeah.
Very eye-opening for a child who, like, up until the age of 6 thought that England was the only country. So just widen my horizons. And then aside from that, I think probably what really hooked me was reading The Lotte Project by Jacqueline Wilson, which is my favorite Jacqueline Wilson book. Very prolific UK children's author, and it is meant to be a contemporary, but the main character in it, Charlie, is learning about the Victorians, and as her project, she writes diary entries about a young girl who is her age called Lotte, who is working as a servant in a great house. And it goes through like different themes, different topics, like family, like work, clothing, medicine, that kind of thing. And each chapter kind of gives you insight into what it would have been like to be a Victorian child. And then it's meant to be mirror everything that she's talking about mirrors something that is happening in Charlie, the main character's life. And so yeah, it's that kind of comparison at the same time of how your life may mirror people in the past, but also how it can be very wildly different. And yeah, just from a child's perspective again, which apparently I need whatever I'm reading about to feel very, very similar to me for me to to get into it. Maybe I need to work on that.
I would say too, like I don't know if you guys like ever heard of, which you might not have, like the American Girl dolls that we have here, which they're like collector's dolls. But basically how they did it was that each doll represented like a period in American history. And so you'd get this doll that would have like all these different outfits and things based on the time period. And then the dolls also had books that corresponded with their story. So there'd be like, my doll was Samantha Parkington, which they don't make her anymore, but she was basically like 1905, 1910, around that time. So like a lot of her story had to do with like the suffrage movement, and like now like the world is like more industrialized, and like she's an orphan and she's living with her grandmother. And so you would find out information about the sort of key events during her lifetime, but she's also a child. And so like my sister had one that I think was more about Josefina was, I think, more like the Mexican-American War. So she had one that was set like a doll from the 1800s, and like a cousin of mine had a doll that was from like the Civil War Reconstruction era. So depending on which doll you had, you could become like a little expert on that time period just by reading the like series of books. But yeah, I think as children, like having that access to something and being able to I guess empathize with them, because it's like when it's adult and you're a kid, it's like what do you know about these hard-hitting topics? So like putting it in simplistic terms makes a lot of sense.
It just made me think. I don't know if they were the dolls that you're talking about. I saw somebody who I think it was somebody who'd like custom made outfits. Historical Barbies, and it was going from like 800 to present day, and just like this runway timeline of all of these different eras. And I was just fascinated by it. I was like, I've not played with dolls since I was like 9 years old, but my goodness, what I would give for that Elizabethan doll. It was so beautiful.
Well, you have nieces, like, don't you? Get the dolls for them and then play with it.
Oh, I don't even know if my niece plays with like Barbie or anything like that. I think she's still.
How
I think
old
she's
is she?
Just like she's 3.
Maybe. Okay, yeah. So she's a little young for Barbies.
Mm-hmm. Though I had an older sister, and I just stole any of her toys. So maybe my understanding of what you're meant to give a small child is a bit warped. Katie, have you heard of the musical called Assassins? Because I think your young self would, well, maybe not your young self, but if that's something you gravitate towards, if assassination is what you gravitate towards, that would be a good one for you.
I've never heard of that, but that's intriguing.
A very dark one to have if you're a young child. Just like, who shot the president?
For sure. The two Katies. Yeah, I'm trying. I don't think I read biographies. I read like, I guess they would have been considered YA, biographies. Although I do remember reading one on Elizabeth Blackwell, who was the first female doctor in America, when I was probably in middle school. And that was at a time when I wanted to be a doctor. So that was like inspirational to me. And now I have The Doctor's Blackwell, which is a book that I want to read for the Her-storyathon, which is about her and her sister. But I read that fairly young. And I've been trying to find out which biography I actually read, and it's like a struggle. I'm like, I wish I still had that like ridiculous 5th grade report card sheet or book report sheet. I don't know if you guys had them, but like title, author, like what's the genre, and then like summarize the plot, and you had lines that you had to write on. But I wish I had that because I want to know what biography I read.
Hey. I don't think we ever did. I don't feel like that kind of book report was something we really did. Like we did just general like essays about the books that we read, but we read them over like a very long, like one book over a very long period of time.
Okay. Yeah, we had, and I think this even was in like elementary school, so probably from like 1st or 2nd grade, each month you were supposed to read a book. And so like you would have like this report that you would have to do, but obviously it was before like you were writing full papers or typing them up. But like each month would have a specific like genre you would have to focus on. So like it might be like, okay, read a mystery this month, or read a biography this month, and then you would like tell your teacher what book you were picking, and then you'd hand in the report. So none of us were reading the same book necessarily, but you'd also have books we were reading as a class. But I remember picking up the Elizabeth Blackwell one, which was probably, to be honest, one of the first biographies I read, like actual history books.
I'm actually just I'm trying to have a scroll through my Goodreads. Like, when did I start actually reading biography for fun? Because I feel like when I was at university, so like 2013 to 2016, the first time I was at uni, I would have been like, nope, not reading anything history related. That is not for my course. Just fill my ears up with something else. But then when I got to my master's, I was like, no, give me all of it. So the first thing that's popping up that would have been outside of what I was studying was A Diary of a Young Girl, which I think is obviously everybody, well, no, not everybody. It's one that I think everybody should read. And I think is maybe a lot of people's like first way into reading diary and memoir. Very obviously tragic.
I think the first diary or memoir I probably read was Zalta's diary, which I feel like it's a book that I have to revisit because I don't remember it like as well as I probably should, but I was very, very young. And it's about the Bosnian War, which I feel like we definitely did not cover in school. Like we didn't get up to the 90s in history courses. So that, like, obviously Anne Frank, but I don't even know that I've read the diaries of Anne Frank in their entirety. I think I've probably read excerpts, but not the full thing, because I feel like it's one of those stories, especially with someone who has an interest in World War II, like, you know the story very, very well. But I should read it. I think Katie did read it last year, actually.
And it's also one that's been like abridged so much or had certain bits censored from it. So making sure that you've got like an unedited, a true like unedited, uncensored one, which I think the one that I had was, because I think it's a lot of what was censored was like her talking about sex and her that people presenting it being no, can't show a 13-year-old girl interested.
No,
which I think
absolutely not.
Was featured in the one that I read. Sorry, I went to
yeah.
My very
on how paper is made.
Bits and pieces that I know about Abigail Adams, I think it sounds like that would be a very interesting paper to write.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Gloria. I need to start it. I need to start it still. I am behind. Everyone's putting me to shame.
I had this morning where Scott from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot had talked in his wrap-up about a book that I think I'd said that I was about to read it like months ago, which is Changed by Ian Mortimer, and I had it as an audiobook ready to go, and I'd listened to the first like 2 hours of it and then put it down, not because I wasn't enjoying it, but because I was like, I moved on to something else. And he's already finished it and really enjoyed it, and then I had to be like, oh, I'm sorry, Scott, I've not actually finished that book. But glad you enjoyed it.
Like hides in shame.
It's like I'm glad to get somebody reading a history book, but I feel I feel the imposter syndrome of, oh no, I haven't read that yet. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yay, at least I'm not the only one that's about Diary of Anne Frank, I think, if I'm reading Katie's mind. Yeah, I also feel like I've seen so many like movie adaptations of the Diary of Anne Frank at this point. Like I feel like every couple of years there's a new one that's out there.
I think I've just seen, who is it who started the big one, which has the guy from West Side Story in it.
Oh yes, I know which one you're talking about.
It's like the first one. I'm forgetting.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about, and I'm blanking.
1959, I think. No, I've seen from 1959 with Millie Perkins.
I feel like there was one that came out in like the early 2000s, maybe, that I remember watching in like school. And it was one of those awkward situations because, to your point, this movie did not do like the censoring of like not talking about like sex in the diaries. So there were these like awkward scenes that my like teacher didn't know were going to be in the movie. So we're watching this, and it's like a girl talking about sex, and she's like 12, and he's just like, he's like, do not mention this to any teachers, because we were like at a Catholic school, so that was like, absolutely not. We're just like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, what's the
1959 version?
like, okay. But it was too late at that point to be like.
But this would have been. I feel like the schools were not prepared to have these conversations when we were at school.
No, absolutely not.
Which I would say a little bit more now.
I would hope so, but who knows?
I actually have stumbled across, when I did actually start reading history.
Oh, you did?
Which was when I was it was me preparing myself to start my master's by being like, let's get yourself back into it by reading some popular history. So it would have been firstly, I'd read like a Mary Beard's Women in Power, which is like a tiny little one.
Yes,
like
I've read that too.
She's given, which has like historical context.
Mm-hmm.
But also the Time Traveller's Guide to Medieval England, which is by Ian Mortimer, his Time Traveller's Guide books, which are I stand by as like very, very good introductions to different time periods. It was just like a very good way of me getting my brain back into that kind of zone of reading history again, because I've basically gone like about a year and a half of being like, I think I just got very burnt out during my dissertation in my third year, and then was like, oh no, actually I really enjoy this. why have I not been reading this for a year and a half? So no, thank you, Ian.
I definitely experienced burnout after like my college years because of how much reading I had to do for my classes, that it was just like the thought of picking up a book for fun did not occur to me. I was like, that was like the beginning of Hulu, where you didn't have to pay for it, and like Netflix. And so it was like, that was how I was like consuming pop culture at the time.
I think I especially during my undergrad, I got very intimidated by other people who were like other students who were clearly on their way to getting PhDs and becoming lecturers.
Yeah.
Which I knew was probably not where I was headed, and who knew so much more than me. Just as like I feel like I had a very like low baseline knowledge, but just like an enthusiasm, and then was being met by people who had the enthusiasm, but also had done so much like further reading at home, or like had family who were really into it, had gone to all these different places, and I was like, oh, I just did very well at this subject at school, and like I like watching period dramas, and that's what my baseline is. And it's suddenly like, you need a lot more to get through your degree. So I feel like I built up a bit more in that interim time before I did my master's, and now I feel like I'm a bit more confident with it, but I still feel like I'm scrambling around, trying to learn more and feeling like I can actually have a conversation with people about history and not embarrass myself. I don't know if I'm
That's
always
fair.
there.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think I love that you can. For me, it's kind of like reading books. Like, as much as I read, there's no way I can possibly read all the books that are out there. But there's something comforting about knowing that there's always going to be stuff that I can reach for. And that's the same thing with history. It's like, there's no way can I be an expert in everything historical, but I can definitely like feel more confident about talking about specific periods. And there are other time periods, other countries, other like historical events that I can like dip into and at least feel like I'm learning constantly. So that to me, like, it's one of those things where it's overwhelming, but it's also very comforting at the same time to know there's so much out there.
And I feel like I'm definitely getting a bit more confident with it, because like I did my my second Penguin Monarchs videos, which are coming. I just have very few gaps in between them. The second one I did was on Ethelred the Unready, and randomly the author Richard Abels found my video and commented on it, and he said he said something like, he said he really enjoyed the video, thought that I got most of it right, but there was like this one thing that he said, oh, it's a little bit something I said, he said, oh, it's probably a bit more nuance than that. Actually, this is more what happened. And I feel like a couple of years ago, I would have been like dying of shame at being corrected by like a prominent historian. And this time I was just like, oh, that's really cool. And that it's cool to get like a fill in of a gap of knowledge, because like early medieval history is not my area at all. But that I was able to get through it enough and just have like this one little thing. I actually felt quite proud of myself for being able to be like, being able to get through a video and not completely mess everything up, and there just to be like this little thing I need to fix. And it's good to be able to that I was able to like not be completely embarrassed with myself for messing a little thing up, and that I can just fill in the gap, and that's okay, and I don't need to like die inside. Which definitely would have been previously. Hey, no, I wholeheartedly agree with this.
Yes, I love the fixation, because that's definitely my strong suit. Like, once I find a time period, I'm all in. I want to read all of the books. And the same thing with like particular figures. A lot of the times it happens to be female figures throughout history, but like I'll want to read every biography. If they have diaries, I want them. If there's like historical fiction about them, I want to read them. So I definitely stumble upon figures and fixate. That is my superpower.
And this is the thing, is that I want to have like a broader understanding. I want to increase the breadth of my history knowledge, but also I like very much burying into like a little hidey hole of certain areas, and just want to learn as much as I can about one thing. And it's that constant like balancing of do you specialize in something, or do you go for breadth? Because I feel like you can have participate in more conversations when you know like more of a lot of history, but then you can go deeper into a topic if you know a lot about one thing or a couple of things. And I don't know where I am on the balance of that, but just dig a little here, and hopefully get to a well-rounded place. I don't know. I did want to ask, is there an aspect of history that you do not enjoy, be it like a field or a time period?
It's funny because when I was studying history, I definitely knew that I was more interested in like cultural history, and like could not stand when we would go like into military history. And that is something that has remained very strong of an opinion of mine, because it's like, I love War and Peace, but the sections where it's like talking about Napoleonic like regimental movements and things, I'm like, I don't care. Like, I'm just like, okay, he's advancing. Like, the Russians are in danger. Okay, that's all I need to know. Move on with the story. I just do not care for the military history all that much. I'm more interested in how, like, yeah, I'm like much more interested in knowing how like the wars impacted the lives of people, and like what sort of like advances occurred because of the war, or what setbacks occurred because of the war. Because I think a lot of the times we focus on like, okay, well, all of a sudden they discovered like penicillin, or like they like, you focus on those things, or there were advances in technology, but the actual military movements I have never been a fan of. And I think because like this is the Her-storyathon and the live show, I mean, one of the things I think has gotten so much better with history in recent years is that there is this interest in the like female figures throughout history that was not there years ago. Like, the figures you talked about were the men, and like you might get like this passing mention of their wife or whomever, or the history of the women that they mentioned, like, which when we talk about Catherine the Great, who is my version of your Matilda, it's like what you learn about these women is like these salacious rumors and legends that were used to actually delegitimize what they accomplished. So that, to me, I like that it's getting better, but it's definitely one of the reasons why even when I read biographies today, I much rather read a biography written by a woman if it's going to be about a female character in history than a male writer, with the exception of like Robert K. Massey, because I think he was objective and like brought up issues and things about like, oh yes, there was this rumor about something with a horse, and like there's no basis for it. Like, it's okay. But yeah, generally, yeah, there's we'll go into that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, for me, it's a case of military history has never been my bag. And I did not like the way that years gone by, women were not part of the overall narrative of history, with the exception of a few people like Elizabeth I. Like, there were a couple key figures, but even then, there were so many more of them.
I'm enjoying how other people are also not fans of military history, because that's as well. I think Goosebumps from Gloria highlights it, because I'm not really a war film person, but I feel like I would much rather watch like a war film or documentary than read a book about it, because then you can visualize it. And something I've heard a lot of people say is that people who are into games and gaming are often into military history, because it's that like strategy, or into sport, it's like strategy and tactics, and I'm like, I do not care. I don't care how many guns you had or how fantastic the guns were, and how like your
outflanking who
was helpful. I try, I really do try. I'll listen to a podcast about like Agincourt or something, and I'm like, this time it will sink in. And as soon as they start talking about formations, I'm like, no.
Yeah, snooze
Just
fest.
tell me about.
I do love a good war film, though. I do like a good war film myself.
Because like a film will get you into like the characters and the emotions that the characters were having, and when like you were saying, like the effects of the war and like the repercussions that it had on people, like I find that fascinating. But the actual nitty gritty of that, no.
Hard pass.
Yep.
Yeah,
I try. That is it.
Guns go bang.
It makes me think of the last episode of Blackadder Goes Forth, when Baldric has his war poem, which is, hear the words I sing, war's a horrid thing, so I sing, ding-a-ling-a-ling. Or and then he's like, I've got one about the German bombs, which is boom, 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 boom. I'm like, yes, that is war. Yes.
That is war.
No, I am same. Ugh.
Yeah, same.
But then I know there are so many people who are into military history that would find like costume and fashion history really uninteresting. But I find that so fascinating, even as somebody who cannot sew to save their lives. Just like they were wearing them every day. Fashion.
It's yeah, I'm sure there are people out there who love the military history. And it's interesting, that point about like people who like games would probably like the military history and like the strategy behind it. Because that does make sense. Like that makes so much sense to me.
Because I'm not a big game person at all. I'm not a very like hands-on practical kind of person, but like learning about like people, I think this is why I like biography so much, is I like learning about people. I think I'm very bad with people in person, but I like learning about them as figures and what their personality is like, and how like different events in their lives shaped them. I find that so fascinating.
Oh, same.
I'm terrible at games. And also in terms of like a time period, I always say I'm an early modernist, but with the 17th century taken out. Basically, as soon as Shakespeare dies, to like the from there up until like George I, I don't care. And I know there are so, especially this is mainly for English history, I know there's so much interesting stuff that comes with the Stuarts and with the English Civil War and Revolution there, but I don't care. You cannot make me interested. I think so much of English Civil War is based around the military side of it and the fighting and turn off. And it is in theory a really interesting time. It's like this little period where we didn't have an actual monarch, and how that changed everything, and then how it kind of reverted back, but slightly different. But no, it's not my time. And I can muster up a bit of interest in things like the Great Fire of London, but just a scotch bit, and that's mainly because it is about like the people's reaction to it, and it's this like very not natural tragedy, but like it's people like coming together over a tragic event, and the changes that facilitated in the city of London. That fine, cool. Everything else around that, I'm not so into.
Hard pass.
But then I have recently I'd been sent a Stuart fashion history book, and it started to click into place. I was like, is the reason that I don't like this, but I do like the Tudors and I do like the Georgians and Regency, is it because I just find Stuart fashion really boring? Or just ridiculous? Because it is. It's a weird mismatch between the two periods and it doesn't make sense to me.
That's fair.
I'll have to do a video on that at some point. But I've
fair.
Read stuff in. I'm like, this is ridiculous. What are they doing?
Yeah.
But that's a very shallow reason to not be into a period, I think.
I mean, we all have our own reasons. Sometimes they're very deep, and sometimes it's, I didn't like your skirt.
You look ridiculous. I don't like these ribbons on your calves. No, these collars are ridiculous. No. But no. I'm building up to it. I do have a couple of Stuart books, and we will bridge some gaps. And maybe I just need to not be maybe I need to not focus on English history, just jump over to somewhere else for the 1600s and work out what they were doing instead. Maybe that's my issue.
That's true. Maybe. I'm trying to think. I mean, as far as like periods in history go, I'm definitely more of a modern history person with some exceptions. And it's funny because I definitely, my courses of study was like 19th century up until the early 20th century. But then there's like also Catherine the Great. And there's like, I have always been interested in Tudor history, but it wasn't like a time period I studied in any like serious sort of format where I took a bunch of classes on it. But yeah, I feel like for me it's basically mid to late 18th century onward, but it's like it's scattered between different countries. It's like, oh, I'm interested in Victorian England here, but I'm interested in the Imperial Russians here, and I'm interested in like the First and Second World Wars in Europe, and so I'm kind of a hodgepodge of different interests.
I see that. Like, I am generally into my Tudors and my Georgians, but then I stumbled across Empress Matilda, and then I was like, okay, I need to learn more about this because she is fascinating.
Yes, you and Empress.
Yeah. I'm like, are we almost at a time to have like our first like soapbox moment?
I think so. You should go in on Empress Matilda. I know you've been prepared for this.
I just don't know if I'm going to be able to like maintain any sort of sense and order. Okay, so we decided that we were going to do what we're going to call like a soapbox moment, where the two of us will just have a little bit of a rant about our favorite female figure of history. And as you may know, currently that person for me is Empress Matilda. And I can have many a rant about this. And I don't know how coherent it's going to be, but I love her and I think she's great. Okay, so give me a sec.
Oh, she's preparing. She needs to be able to go off. Ready?
Yes. Okay, so Matilda, born in 1102, she was the daughter of Henry I of England, who was the son of William the Conqueror. So Matilda is William the Conqueror's granddaughter. She was the she was the only legitimate daughter of Henry I. He also had a legitimate son, and then a billion other illegitimate children because Henry I got around a lot. This will be an issue later when he has lots of sons who cannot inherit his throne. But just put a pin in that for now. So she, from quite a young age, is married off to the Holy Roman Emperor. She's sent off at like the age of 8. Weird in itself. But they didn't marry until 12, which is just like, oh, yay. Yeah, that makes it so much better. But they had, to all intents and purposes, had like quite a nice marriage, quite respectful. He was a lot older than her. We have to just get our heads away from that, because it's just the time period is. He was like 3 times older than her when she came up for it. I'm not okay with it. But this is the time.
Yeah.
Okay. He really respected her. I think he saw like what a great mind she had, and like her capability in ruling. Like there were periods of time where he wasn't there, and she was like effectively ruling the Holy Roman Empire. But then disaster strikes in 1120 with the White Ship disaster. Basically, what we learn from the White Ship disaster is that alcohol and sailing late at night do not mix. Basically,
so because we needed to be told that.
Well, apparently they did. So Henry I and his son are traveling from France in Harfleur, I think, to Barfleur? No, over back to England, and they set sail quite late at night. And Henry is on one ship, and William is on the White Ship, with all of like the young nobility of the time. And they hit a rock. It all goes down. One person survives because nobody can swim in this time period. And disaster, because that is Henry I's only legitimate heir. That is a son, at least. Ha ha ha. And it takes him a while to come around to the idea of, oh wait, I have another child who is legitimate to the daughter. I wonder how my nobles will feel about that. And initially, the nobles seem to be on board with this. And twice he brings this up with his nobles and say, this is my daughter Matilda. She has some ruling experience. Would you support her claim to the throne when I die? And they're like, totally. Yeah, we'll absolutely do that, Henry and Matilda. Totally. Jobs are good. By this point, Matilda's first husband, Henry, has died. And she, knowing that she has to have heirs if she is going to rule England, ends up being married to Geoffrey of Anjou, who is like, is he like 10 years or 12 years younger than her? It's not right. It is not right at all. I think he's like 14 and she's 25. I don't know why they couldn't have picked somebody better than this. Somebody who's closer in age to her. I don't understand medieval dealings with marriage. We never will. And she doesn't like him. They don't get on. There is a point where they are separated from each other, but because she's not had a child yet, everybody's like pushing her back to marrying him. And she's like, fine, I will go back to the man-child and have babies with him. Because that is my job. Because that's apparently all I am fit to do as a woman in this society, is that I have to be a mother. Otherwise you don't think I'm worth anything. So she does that. She has her heir and spare. She's currently pregnant with her 3rd child when her father dies. And so, pregnant woman in medieval time periods who lives in a different country, that's, hard journey to do. Not going to do that right now. But, you would expect, because all of these nobles have said that they are going to support her claim to the throne, that, that should be fine. The throne will be fine. The throne was not fine. They did not keep it warm. God's sake.
Oh, man.
She didn't put her coat on the throne, so somebody decided it was theirs. And so Stephen of Blois decides that I'm in line for the throne, even though I've got 2 older brothers. Mine now. I bagsy that, and takes it from her.
Oh man.
When I get to the moment when I have to do my Stephen Penguin Monarchs video, I'm very tempted to just like hold the book, have a lighter, and just like joke about being, because a load of historians say that he was like a good king and he was a nice person, but I don't care. Thief. No. Thief.
That's fair.
Stole it from my Matilda. So, we have to get our ducks in a row, because for a time, people are quite happy with Stephen, even though he stole the throne. But eventually, we get to a point where people are not happy about this arrangement, including like the King of Scotland, including one of Matilda's half-brothers, and they decide that they're going to go on the side of Matilda. And eventually, Matilda does decide that she is going to claim the throne back. And so the anarchy begins. And there's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of chaos. I don't understand how there hasn't been like a major like focused like drama about this, because it's very interesting. There's a lot of back and forth. At one point they actually capture Stephen, which I hadn't known about until I read this biography. This is not a period of history I had much knowledge about. We're not taught it at school. As from what I know of other people's curriculums, they're not taught about it. But like she has him at one point. She is about to get crowned, but she ends up being kicked out. Was it Canterbury or was it I don't know? Being kicked out by the people because people are saying that that Matilda is too arrogant, and basically they don't like how forceful she is being as a woman about her claim, which is really interesting when you consider that all of the things that they would say about men, about being like a strong male presence, about you know, like he's forceful and that's a good thing, but when it's a woman doing it on her own throne, it's a bad thing. She's too stubborn, she's too forceful. You know, we don't like that in women, apparently.
No,
but it's fine in men. If you look at the Chronicle, like when they compare and contrast it, like the ways that they talk about Henry I and the way they talk about her son Henry II, and then the way they talk about Matilda, it's like they're acting exactly the same, and she's probably copying a lot of what she'd seen how she'd seen her father behave, but because she's a woman, it's not okay, and it's too much. So she never ends up actually being crowned, even though she was so close.
No.
She was, and also along the way, her brother ends up being captured by Stephen's forces. So they have to do a trade because she can't lose her brother, they can't lose Stephen. So the advantage that both of them have goes. Eventually, along the way, you know, they've been fighting for a good 20 years at this point. And Matilda decides that she's going to change tact, and she's actually going to fight for her son, who will become Henry II. And Stephen does agree that I find it quite funny because he actually did have like sons, but he's like, okay, to stop this fighting, I will agree that your son will be king and not mine. And I can only assume that his sons were not happy about that, but he actually quite conveniently died not too long after that agreement was made.
Well, that is very convenient.
There's a lot of convenient deaths in this like time period. Like, bye-bye, don't need to deal with you. So eventually, when Stephen dies, the throne does pass to Henry II, and Matilda has like, she does have a fairly good relationship with him, and he does respect her opinion. He ends up marrying Eleanor of Aquitaine. I don't feel like there's a whole lot about their relationship, Matilda and Eleanor's, but I feel like it would have been like a very interesting like family dinner situation, those two women.
I feel like I feel like at some point in some movie there was an Eleanor of Aquitaine and like her mother-in-law, but the mother-in-law like made it on the screen for like a hot second. But I don't remember what movie it was in.
This is one that I'm really interested in that next generation. So Eleanor and then Richard I's queen, Berengaria, because we don't know much about her. I feel like that, but they spent a few weeks together taking Berengaria from Navarre to where Richard was, and I feel like they must have had a time of it. Like she's a very Eleanor an intimidating presence, and from the little we know about her, about Berengaria, it's like I feel like I'd have been terrified to have her as my mother-in-law. But no, anyway. Matilda back in France. I don't think she doesn't return to England after her initial fighting. So she doesn't see him in Henry II in England. But I think she dies 1167. And the bit that always grinds my gears after everything that she's gone through, on her tomb, it read, Henry II wrote that she was great by birth, great by marriage, greatest in her offspring. Here lies the daughter, wife, and mother of Henry. So they don't name her and say that basically the only reason that she was any good was because of all of these men. I was like, what? What is it?
Frustration. That
I love like the fact that he picked up on the fact that her father, husband, and son were all called Henry. I like the wordplay going on there, but I don't like the sentiment.
No. That's annoying. It's like Matilda's rolling over in her grave. Like, what?
You did what?
Oh man.
I may be completely wrong. I think she's buried in Rouen, and I think you can still see where she was buried. I could be wrong. I don't know if it was destroyed at some point. That's something I need to look more into. But I know that like the location is still open. Okay. So we will see. There's a lot that I missed out on there, a lot that I've forgotten. But those were like my major points. And the more that I read about her, the more that I'll be able to fill in any of those gaps. Basically, long and short, we need like some sort of biopic show about the anarchy that has Empress Matilda at the forefront. Also, if you are as obsessed with Matilda as I am, and you have been, as I have been, absolutely baffled that there isn't much merch in the way of Empress Matilda as there is for.
Oh, I know where this is going.
For example, Elizabeth, which I have a mug for here. Brittany knows. I recently reached out to an Etsy seller called Plantagenet Prints, who do custom. Or they basically do lots of little prints. They're really cute designs of different historical figures, mainly royals. And I reached out to the seller and asked, would it be possible to get an Empress Matilda print, like custom made? And they are now selling that on their website, and
it's very cool.
I commissioned it, and I feel really proud of it. And I'll have to pop it. I'll have to find it and pop it in the comments thing because I'm just very proud of it. And I've ordered my print, and it will be coming hopefully in the next week or so. And I really hope that you do get a Catherine the Great one.
Yeah, no, I'm already planning to like name drop you and be like, my friend had commissioned you to do Matilda and loved it. Would you be open to doing Catherine the Great? And go from there because it's adorable. And now I want Catherine.
I can see like which painting she would use. Like Matilda, you've got like one maybe confirmed, but not sure. Like some people use it as Eleanor, some people say it's Matilda. I think it's Matilda, the one that was chosen. So but who knows?
Yeah,
who knows? We want lots and lots of images of her that are confirmed to be her. But I really like it. And I'm very proud of it.
It's adorable. I love it. You need it framed. It needs a prominent place in your future booktube videos.
I've ordered a couple of sizes. So I've got one that's I'm basically having a little print wall in my office because apparently I can do it. So I've got a few things that I'm getting for my birthday that I'm going to pop up, and then I've also got like a little A4. I'm going to get an A4 off Matilda and pop her up. So she's my inspo, and then I'm going to get like a smaller size to put on my little mantelpiece in my room. So yeah, maybe obsession at this point, but
it's fine. We all have our obsessions.
Where there is not historical merch, you have to find it and custom order it for yourself. Moral of the story.
This is very, very true.
Books for Matilda. Matilda, Empress, Queen, Warrior by Catherine Hanley was like my first entrance into Matilda, and I adored that book. It was my favorite book of 2020. I have not read, but it's on my TBR for this month, Stephen and Matilda's Civil War by Matthew Lewis, not Neville Longbottom, historian Matthew Lewis. There's also a Stephen Matilda book. I need to find the book. I need to find the author's name, but I've heard that it's meant to be talking about the Civil War, about the anarchy, but it's very much he's very much on Stephen's side and doesn't seem to like Matilda very much from what I've heard. And I'm open to reading different points of view, but not right now. Not when I'm in such a Matilda high do I want to read about somebody saying that she's no good. Also, Alison Weir talks about her in her Queens of the Conquest, but I don't like how she talks about her. I don't think it's very balanced. It definitely goes down the route of she was too stubborn, she was too up herself. And it basically takes all of the chronicles for gospel and says, well, the chronicles said that, so it must be true. Whereas what I like about Catherine Hanley is that she's very much like, this is what the chronicles were saying, but why were they saying that? Was it because they were supportive of Stephen, and so therefore they are going to side with him over Matilda and try and paint Matilda out as a terrible person? Yes, I did. Yeah. So those are my ones for now. I just think I think she's great. I agree with this. I think it would have been either or.
Yeah, I can see that.
Oh yes, She-Wolves. I've got the book of She-Wolves, which also features Matilda, and that's also on my TBR. Thanks to Kieran.
And it's like I do remember seeing this title somewhere. Yes. Was it your TBR?
Yeah. It's Helen Castor. The
okay.
book.
Yeah.
I think it's the women who ruled England before Elizabeth I, the great rebellious women. So we've got Matilda, I think, Eleanor of Aquitaine, I think Isabella of France, I think Margaret of Anjou. I don't know if Mary I pops up.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
You do always have to wonder what the everyday person is thinking. Just like, oh God, another one of their wars again. Can't we just get on?
Can't we all just get along, people?
I have heard that I feel like I'm very hit and miss with Alison Weir. Whereas when I like what she's written, I loved The Lady in the Tower, which was about Anne Boleyn, which from what I've heard about her opinions on Anne Boleyn in her in The Six Wives, apparently she doesn't like her very much and kind of believes all of the rumors. But I never got that impression from The Lady in the Tower, which was written later, I believe. I think it was written 10 years after she did her Six Wives.
Yeah.
But then there are
I read Six Wives a million years ago. I think I was in middle school or high school when I read it. And I can't remember all that much about it. I think I enjoyed it at the time, but I read her Young Elizabeth book or Lady Elizabeth, whatever it was called, and I was not a fan of it.
Yeah, I just read the second one, which I didn't realize there was a younger Elizabeth, but I read The Marriage Game, which is once she takes the throne, and it's mainly about love entanglements with Robert Dudley, and is she going to marry? And it was one where I think I stuck with it mainly because I love that history so much, and I think I kind of so I was very critical of it, but I settled into it and was because I knew where it was going, I stuck with it. But it did very much feel like this feels like kind of the opposite of Kate Moore, where Kate Moore feels like narrative. The Marriage Game felt very much like it was non-fiction but with dialogue thrown in, because it was
interesting,
and not really focusing on how these characters were feeling or anything to do with personality, which I like out of my fiction personally.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you, Katie. No, I didn't think she showed up. But I felt like the 4 that I'd mentioned weren't enough people.
Oh.
I still got to do a recommendations video at some point this month. And I realised how lacking I am in historical fiction that is actually about a real woman. Because I was like, oh, I've read loads of those.
I feel like I had so many. I had a lot, surprisingly. Yes. So we have varying opinions on Alison Weir, it seems like. I hate watched it. It was one of those things where it was like watching a train wreck. First of all, I couldn't get over the costumes because I'm just literally you just went into like a store where a bunch of teenagers would get prom dresses and just picked a bunch of them and maybe added some lace and we're like, ta-da! And
No.
I was just, it was like, I remember people wearing those dresses to like prom. And I'm like, so you really didn't spend any time or money on the costumes, and it really upset me.
It was like long dresses.
It was one of the, yeah, it's like long dresses and like slender girls. Like that was really it. It's interesting because it's like one of those shows where it's so soap opera-y, but for like teenagers, that I couldn't take it seriously. And I'm like, thank God I didn't take it seriously. But at the same time, like, I get so like nervous when I see those sorts of like takes on history, because like I know it's not steeped in reality, but someone who is not as passionate about history watches that and takes it as like the facts. So I always feel some sort of way when there's such little regard for the actual history over the course of the book, or the TV show or the movie or whatever it might be. But I did watch, I think, the first season of it. I don't think I watched any more of that, although I did thoroughly enjoy the actress who played Catherine de Medici.
Yeah, she
So.
I'm just getting into Anne of Green Gables, and I believe she played Anne in like an 80s version of it. So I was like,
oh really?
Like a younger. No, I have seen exactly 2 episodes of Rain. The first one because my friend India, one of my oldest friends, loves Rain, and she knows that it's not historically accurate, but it's one of her go-to shows, just like comfort watching shows. So she really wanted me to get into it, and like every 5 minutes I would pause it to be like, this is not right. Here are all the reasons why this is not right. And most of the time I for a lot of inaccuracy things, I don't care too much, especially if it is like bringing people into it and it's not harmful. But I just got so annoyed with this. Like I forgive a lot of stuff like the Tudors. I think the Tudors is like my limit, where I'm like, I know that a lot of stuff is not right in this, but I enjoy it anyway. There is an attempt.
No.
Whereas with Rain, I feel like there was no attempt. They just have names, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And and also the costumes. So I feel like India really wants me to get into it and to watch it, but I was just pausing every 5 minutes, and it took me about 2 days to watch the second episode because I couldn't do it.
That's fair.
But I feel like I want to know. I want to know exactly what.
It had several seasons too, didn't it? Have like
4 seasons.
Yeah, so it was around for a while. But yeah, no, I didn't watch it. I don't think I watched it when it like first aired. So I watched it whenever it was like appeared on Netflix, because it was like, ooh, this should be interesting. And then I was just like, no, I can't. I'm sorry.
And also because one of the girls was in Neighbours, like way back when I used to watch Neighbours, and I think one of them was Susan in Narnia. I felt like,
yeah,
as adults, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah, no. And the thing is like, to your point, like the Tudors. Oh yes,
running commentary. And I'm not even that much into like Mary Queen of Scots history, but I know what's wrong. I can know when it's right.
I'm fascinated by her as a figure. But that show, and it's like, to your point, like there are certain limits. Like I really enjoyed the Tudors, like that show with Jonathan Rhys-Meyers and Natalie Dormer as Anne Boleyn. But I knew there were things that were inaccurate about it, and like some of it I could understand. Like they like Henry's sisters, they like to not have too many Marys on the show. They like kind of smushed siblings of Henry VIII together, and like stuff like that. And I was like, okay, fine, that's valid. Like you would have a lot of Marys on that set to keep track.
You have about 50,000 Thomases.
Yes. So it's like clearly it's like one of those things where it's like clearly you think that everyone will be able to tell the different Thomases that are men apart from each other, but you don't think that they will be able to tell the different Marys from one another. And I'm just like, fine, but at least like the costumes, like were they 110% accurate? No, but at least they put a little effort into them. So I mean, I loved that show when it first came out, and I feel like that's one of those things that I'll go back to every once in a while, because it's like there's certain episodes that I really enjoy, and I really enjoyed the portrayal of Anne Boleyn in the series overall. So it's just funny. I definitely have different tolerances for stuff. Like I cannot watch The Great on Catherine with Dakota Fanning. I can't do it. Like I know it's meant to be I know it's meant to be satirical. It's a comedy. I didn't even get through one episode. Like I made it maybe 15 minutes and I was just like, I can't do this. My brain wanted to explode, and everyone loves it. And they're like, you should watch it if you're and I'm like, nope. I can't do it. So it's one of those things, maybe at some point I'll return to it. But right now I'm just like, I can't deal with the satire on my beloved Catherine right now.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, but knowing fully that just take it with a pinch of salt, because take it with a pinch of salt because it's not anything close to, like there are nods to things, like it brings up inoculation and heroin, but everything like little bits and pieces, but the whole is not. But it's so funny, and I love like it's, and I feel like the second season hasn't come out here, as far as I know. So I've not seen that.
I think it's on Hulu now here, but I haven't been following it. I just know like it was up for awards and things, and I was just like, I can't do it. Can't, must resist.
I think the performances are so good for me, like comedic performances of Nicholas Hoult as Peter.
Yeah,
and I think Elle Fanning is really funny, and I didn't expect her to be. That pulls you through. But you just have to. For me, I just had to watch it as like a funny thing that is kind of flirting with history, but not actually committing to it. But if you're so into that, I can see that, because I know Olive, Book Olive. I think she posted a review of it and her frustrations with it. At one point.
That wouldn't surprise me.
So yeah, I can see that definitely.
Yeah, because I'm not like Olive is like me when it comes to Russia.
But then there's like, for me, there's like the other Boleyn girl where I can watch it, but I will be ranting about it the whole way through.
Yeah,
and same. I feel like so many people get into the Tudors through that film, and I'm like, I can't believe this is the way that people are being introduced to Anne Boleyn, and I hate it.
Yeah, no. I do too. I think that's. I feel like that was the book with Philippa Gregory that sort of had me start turning against her, because I used to, anytime she put out a book, and especially if it was on Tudor England, I was like, must read it. And I had so many of them, and then it was just like, because Anne Boleyn is probably my favorite wife of Henry VIII. Like I did not like her depiction. I did not support it. And then that was the one that blew up. Like that's the one that became the movie with Natalie Portman and Scarlett Johansson, and everyone was like, "Oh my god!" And I'm just like, "This is not Anne Boleyn. Like, let's not."
See people and they're like, "Oh, that Anne Boleyn, what a terrible person." I'm just like, she was a complicated figure.
Yeah, like it's highly nuanced. But yeah, no.
But there's certain things that they're doing right-ish, and there are a lot of like, and I think there are like, if you are watching it as just with the history part of your brain turned off, like I guess there are some aspects of it that are interesting from a character perspective, but
Yeah.
I'm like, this is Anne. This is not my Anne. No.
Yeah, this is not my Anne.
I much prefer Natalie Dormer's Anne.
Yeah, me too.
So I found it really interesting when I read more into the production of the Tudors, like a lot of the reason that she's portrayed the way she is because of Natalie Dormer insisting that they adhere more to historical accuracy. Like they wanted her to have her natural blonde hair, but she dyed her hair brown in anticipation of the role.
Yeah, I read that.
And she was like, but she was brunette. What are you talking about? And they didn't want, and she wanted to bring more nuance into her portrayal, and they were like really resisting that. And I thought that was really interesting, like how different it would have been if it had been a different actress playing her who wasn't so passionate about the history.
Yeah, I mean, I would say too that the portrayal of Catherine, yes, Katie and I have gone on rants about that. The actual portrayal of Catherine of Aragon in the Tudors was also interesting to me because as someone who was like such a hardcore Anne Boleyn fan, like it was very easy for me to like, in my sort of naivete, be very opposed to Catherine of Aragon and be like, why couldn't you just give up? Like he didn't want to be married to you anymore, and like just have that like tantrum as children do when they can't get their way. But I found her depiction of Mary Doyle Kennedy's as Catherine of Aragon really nuanced too. So the two of them together like showed you that it wasn't necessarily as clear cut as I think some history books have made it seem, because a lot of history books have demonized Anne Boleyn and like sort of made her out to be this great seducer who usurped the throne from Catherine, who was this like devoted queen and everything. So I did think those two actresses pitted against each other in those roles was interesting in the Tudors.
I'm just noticing the comments, and I just want to say, because Katie was saying about getting into the Tudor period and because of Philippa Gregory earlier. And that I do want to say I had my Tudor module that I did at uni was actually taken by a lecturer called John Cooper, who actually is very good friends with Philippa Gregory, and he would like talk about about like their friendship, and he was like, yeah, she bought me chickens for my garden. I was like, oh, that's very sweet. So I think there's a lot of I have a lot of respect for how Philippa Gregory has gotten like an entire generation of people into the period. And it's I keep flirting with the idea of reading her book, because I never read any of the Philippa Gregory books, just because I knew like I know that
makes sense.
Were inaccuracies, and I always want to like read The Other Boleyn Girl just so I know exactly her depiction and not just through the film.
Yeah,
but I've been too scared to, because I feel like my brain is just going to be like, no. But it's enjoyment, and it gets people into it. And I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, that for sure. It was her books that got me into that period originally. Yeah. Like it was already a period I was interested in.
Yeah, I feel like she clearly enjoys the period, and I think she's making like deliberate choices of what she's including and what she isn't, rather than it just being like, nah, I'll just throw in whatever I want.
Yes.
You do have to you do have to make certain choices for the sake of the narrative, and I think they are like planned things, rather than let's just throw anything in for the sake of entertainment. We can be very snobby.
I feel like it's just funny that she's like become kind of like the reigning queen of like historical fiction. Like if you ask anyone who, in whether they are a reader or not, they probably recognize the name Philippa Gregory, even if they've never read one of the books. Or if you said like The Other Boleyn Girl, like people would know exactly what you're talking about. And she did popularize, I think, especially in the US, that time period. to a degree that I don't think any other author has been able to do with a historical period. And there are some authors out there in that, like, they focus on a key period and they publish multiple books on that era, but none of them have taken hold in sort of the pop culture realm in the same way as Philippa Gregory. Because I mean, Alison Weir, look at how many books she has, but I feel like people who know her books are people who are already interested in the period or who are big readers. Like, her name wouldn't mean much out of the context of kind of the book world and book sphere.
Absolutely. And like Philippa Gregory, like more often than not, if you go into a British supermarket, one of her books will be in like this book stand at Tesco. And they usually, you know, the stuff that's in the supermarket are like the stuff that they know people are going to pick up, like very approachable, accessible books, and they're always there. Like there's just been a new reissue of The White Queen, and it's very beautiful, and that makes me want to read it.
I remember reading the White Queen books.
And it's always there. And like, so things like Hilary Mantel, like the Thomas Cromwell series is always there because like that's a book that people are talking about. But I think, you know, even people who are into Tudor history are a bit intimidated by it.
I haven't read them.
Yeah, I feel like it's a book that people will pick up, but they may not necessarily read because it is a lot to like wrap your head around, the way that it's. I'm a massive like Walpole fangirl, and I recommend it to everybody. But like, I know that like a lot of my friends, when they've read it, they've been like reading book in one hand and then like their phone in the other hand, like trying to look things up to make sure that they've got things straight. And like that was me for like quite a few of the characters too, even though like that's like it's my favorite period, and like I feel like I do have a good grounding in it, but it's still like it's so steeped in the history that but it's
for sure.
And I think whereas Philippa Gregory, you don't really need that kind of prep to get into it, like just get straight into it. And I have a lot of respect for Philippa Gregory in that regard, even if I don't agree with all of the like narrative choices that she makes. And I do need to actually properly read them rather than just relying on what other people have said. I'm very bad for doing that.
You might. I feel like you should start with the White Queen, the like Plantagenet, War of the Roses ones, because I feel like those were interesting to me, and that was a time period I didn't know about before I read those books, because it's not like we talk about the War of the Roses here in history class.
Yeah,
like at all.
This is the thing. War of the Roses, I think it must be on the curriculum somewhere for some schools, but it wasn't for ours. And I think it's one of those events in history that I think people expect that you do know, but they don't teach it to you. They're just like, oh, the Wars of the Roses, you know how that went. And I'm like, no, I don't.
No, actually,
no. I mean, I do know. I've like done my Tudor modules, but it's still like not the best, the thing that I'm the best at. And it has been fiction that's opened that up. Like when I was reading, I read Cecily last year, and it was actually going through a thing that actually really helped me in getting into that a bit more, rather than just like the little initial outline that I had off that conflict.
I have that book. I'm very excited to read it. It nearly made it onto my TBR for the Her-storyathon. Very nearly.
No, I think my friend Becky is reading that right now. Has been enjoying it so far.
Oh yeah, no, I think I saw that she was on her IG stories.
Yeah, I like that.
They're snacks.
Don't necessarily have to have all the nutritional value to them, but they're good fun.
Yeah, and both Charlotte and I have serious sweet teeth, so they're probably candy for us. That is my treat of choice. Anything with sugar.
I'm actually amazed that I haven't reached over and gotten anything right now in the middle of a.
I've resisted the gummy bears. I don't even know where they are at the moment. They're on the floor beside me.
Never too far away.
No, never.
Oh. We haven't done your soapbox moment yet.
Oh, my soapbox moment. Okay. So I've been like trying. Anyone who is a subscriber to my channel knows that my ultimate like historical girl crush is Catherine the Great, which is funny because I feel like she is this amazing character and figure in history that there's been so many rumors and things about her over the course of her life that were really used to discredit her. But she was born in, I want to say 1729. She was a Prussian princess, so her name was Sophie. And she ends up, kind of through the machinations of her mother, Joanna, getting married to the future Tsar of Russia, Peter. But it's really interesting because Catherine goes to Russia where she does not speak the language. She is not Russian Orthodox. And she like wholeheartedly flings herself into learning Russian to the point that she becomes fluent in it, and can speak Russian, which Russian is not an easy language to learn. And she learns it, and she ends up converting to the Russian Orthodox Church, and really embodying a lot of like what the Russian ideal is. But her mother is, throughout history, Joanna is kind of described as this cold woman who loves like courtly intrigue and gossip. And when Catherine moves to Russia in this like attempt to get her betrothed to Peter, her mother and the Empress of Russia, Elizabeth, don't exactly get along, to the point that like the Elizabeth like basically bans her mother from court and like wants her out of the country because this woman is just all about the gossip, all about the courtly intrigue. But Catherine is able to basically win over Elizabeth and the people of Russia, because no one really likes Peter. Peter is really immature, not the most healthy looking young man. Catherine likes to make fun of his obsession with toy soldiers, and like he's just not super likable, and they don't really have a great relationship or marriage, but people love Catherine. And it's interesting because she ends up becoming Catherine of Russia, because Elizabeth dies. Peter becomes the czar, the emperor, whatever you want to call it. And his reign is really short because basically everyone is plotting to dethrone him. They don't like him. And Catherine, who has no actual claims to the throne, is the one that a lot of people kind of rally behind. So she comes to power in a coup. Like she literally like takes over from her husband. She has no claims to the throne herself. Peter is arrested. He dies under mysterious circumstances, which like the reports say illness. But basically everyone thinks that it is yes, Peter sucks. Catherine totally rocks. Basically they say that it is Catherine's lover at the time, Orlov, who kills her husband. But Catherine comes to the throne and is just a boss. Basically, she becomes Catherine the Great. Like that title is bestowed upon her within 5 years of her reigning, which is what like solidifies her place. Because like otherwise she does not have a legal claim to the throne. She has a son who you would think theoretically if your father's dead, it would go to him. And no, she makes sure that doesn't happen. So it's not like there weren't alternatives. There was also like Ivan, is it I want to say the sixth, who was like in Schusselburg prison, who had claims to the throne. So there are all these people that could have potentially dethroned her, and because she is politically astute and savvy, none of that happens. But she gets this title within 5 years, which if you compare it to someone like Peter the Great, he didn't get that title until he was like 4 decades into his reign. So she does some incredible things. She has a lot, like she's one of these people that was really interested in the enlightened thinkers from France. So she had like correspondences with like Diderot. She read Voltaire, all of those people. Oh, my headphones are about to die. Hold on. So she had those ideals. She wanted to end serfdom. She isn't able to, but that was one of the things she wanted to do. She, over the course of her reign, she expands Russia quite extensively. She makes it this great European power. She's a big patron of the arts. Actually, the Hermitage Museum, a lot of the art that's there now was from her own personal collection. And I read a book about her art collection with like, if you like shipwrecks and sort of buried treasure, it was quite interesting because like the ship with all these paintings by Dutch masters that Catherine bought end up sinking on their way to Russia, and so people are trying to find the ship. But she did all of that. She was just really, really smart about what she was doing within the course of her rule. She never went to battle herself, so she was not like a war queen in that sense, but she definitely had the like strategy down and had the support of her various lovers. Yes. Yes, she's queen of sassy comments too. But it's just, for me, it's just incredible because I feel like so many people talk about like Elizabeth I, and I can see so many parallels between the two of them, and people don't give Catherine the Great as much credit as she is owed. But like she really made Russia a preeminent power in the world at the time. And the rumors that were kind of around, I think, were primarily placed by her son Paul, who was very bitter about the fact that he did not get to take the throne when he thought he should have. And he was very bitter about like the mystery around his father's death. He blamed Catherine, which, to be honest, I probably would have blamed Catherine in his shoes too. But like historians at the time would talk about like her sort of salacious affairs and make her out to be this like succubus who was bedding all these different men. And the thing with the horse is that she actually supposedly had like sex with a horse. There's a whole smear campaign around her to discredit her. And Paul actually does a lot to reverse as much of his mother's influence when he comes to power, when Catherine dies, where he's trying to make it seem like none of his mother's accomplishments really happened, like frame it that he is the successor to his father. And he is the one, I believe, who puts a rule into effect that makes it impossible for basically another woman to be the Tsarina or the Empress regnant in Russia. So she is the last one to rule in her own right, and she is also the longest reigning female empress, Tsarina in Russia. And that doesn't happen again because of Paul, but like before her, you had Catherine 1, you had Elizabeth, obviously, you had Catherine 2. So you had this series of very powerful women in Russia reigning, kind of one right after the other. But Catherine is just amazing to me, accomplished so much. Was she perfect? No. She definitely had despotic tendencies, as one would expect from any monarch living during that time period. But she's just one of those figures that I think history is finally starting to kind of correct or do a course correction on how she's depicted, with things like I mean, The Great came out at the same time that Catherine the Great with Helen Mirren came out, and that one, which I have watched and actually enjoy, like, it does bring up a lot of it pokes fun at certain rumors. Like, there's a whole discussion about like her sexual partners and things like that. But it also brings up stuff like how she had herself inoculated against smallpox and how that was something that she really felt strongly about. But she's just great in my mind, and a figure that I feel like more people need to pay attention to. But yeah, no, I want my own little printout of hers now, because now you made me jealous. You have Matilda, I want Catherine. So yeah, that is my very rambly soapbox.
No, I love it. No, I love it whenever you talk Catherine the Great, because she is a very interesting figure that I know the story, but I'm not in as much detail as I would like to be. I definitely need to pick up the Massey biography.
Yeah. I mean, the Massey one is really interesting because although it is really big, it's like 500 or so pages. I do feel like it is written in a very accessible way. So even if you don't have a ton of knowledge of that particular time in Russian history, I don't think you're at like some severe disadvantage. Where that sometimes with certain biographies, it assumes that you have this background that you can base and like use as context. But the Massey one, basically everyone that I know who's read it has really, really enjoyed it. So I'm definitely looking for more books on Catherine, because I honestly don't think there are as many as I would like there to be. I'm hoping Ellen Alpston, who's written a book on Catherine 1 and then has a book on Elizabeth coming out this month here. I'm hoping what she is doing is like basically writing one on each of these female figures. So I'm hoping like if she's doing a third book that it'll be on Catherine the Great, because I really enjoyed the Catherine the First one, who is a figure that I knew of but didn't know a ton about. And she was Catherine the Great's namesake. So that to me is really interesting. But that's my hope, is that her third book will be on Catherine the Great.
Have you seen there's one coming out called The Empress and the English Doctor, which is particularly about her efforts at promoting inoculation?
I actually haven't even heard anything about this one.
Yeah, it's coming out here. It's coming out on the 7th of April. I just talked about. I just filmed my my like anticipated reads for like April to June, and that was on my list. And I was like, Brittany's gonna love this.
Yes, I haven't even heard about it.
How Catherine the Great Defied a Deadly Virus is the
Whoa. Yeah, it's coming out here, it looks like, in April too, which this will definitely go on my anticipated releases, which I haven't done my April, May, June ones yet. But this sounds awesome. Oh, it's coming out in June here. That's probably why it's not on my radar yet. But that's exciting.
Oh. I think there's obviously like a lot of interest in that kind of side because of
pandemic, the pandemonium.
People denying vaccines. Where have we seen this before?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. But yeah, that sounds right up my alley. So that will promptly be going on my anticipated releases. And probably be one of those books that there are very few. I don't know if this is the same with you, but I get really excited about books and then buy them as they come out, but it'll probably be a good year before I actually get around to reading it. So I'm not one of those people that like I get the new book and I sit down, stop everything that I'm doing and read the book often. But like Catherine related books, I would definitely do that with. So yeah, so that'll definitely be in my anticipated releases video that's coming up, I guess sometime in March.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. But it would have to be, it's not even that like the book would really have to sweep me away to, I think I'm just such a mood reader that my mood would have to absolutely be in the zone for that new book for me to pick it up, read it immediately. So it does happen. And that's like a weird, like serendipitous moment where like my mood has matched what's coming out. But yeah, there's a lot of things that are currently I am very excited for, but I'm not quite in the mood to read them yet, even though I bought them 2 years ago.
Yeah, I definitely books age on my shelf a little bit, and then I get around to them eventually.
Sorry, we're taking a trip to the kitchen because I just realized I have to pop something in the fridge.
Oh,
sorry,
goodness.
down for a second.
Ooh. We're getting a tour. Wait, wasn't that where you were before? Or did I? You walked really fast. I was like, I know this background.
Sorry, life got in the way of the live.
All good.
Like that's been defrosting for a few hours. That's got to go in the fridge, or it's going to be very bad. No, I love no. So the Massey, I find it funny that I'm very interested in picking up that Empress and the English Doctor, even though I'm like, surely I need to get a bit more of I should have more of a biography under my belt before I go on this like very specific thing about her life and what she got up to. But then there's also part of me that thinks, well, it's very, very topical to what's been going on. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that's a way into the rest of her life.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, every time there's a new, like, this is it. I look so much into my queens and my empresses and my royal ladies that I do need to. I think this is what this has been very good at, is bringing up women who are not just. In fact, there's very few, like, it focuses very little on like women who would be considered leaders, and like I don't think there might be like 1 or 2 royals in it, but very few. And it is generally like ordinary people who just like
I mean, I think like it's very easy with like history books to focus on those sort of royal ladies and nobility because there's probably more documented about their lives than a lot of kind of the everyday person, especially in specific time periods. So it makes them easier to like create and craft an entire like biography on. But I do like those kind of primer books, like the modern history. What is the title in the US? I don't even remember. Where is it? That was here. The Women's History of the Modern World, or Rebel Women, because you're not going to get any like full history or biography on them, but there's enough there to kind of entice you, and maybe like if you're like me, you go down those research rabbit holes where it's just like, oh well, this woman's really interesting. What books are there about them? And like you start finding fiction and nonfiction, and you can kind of become an expert on said woman because you happen to stumble across like a chapter in a book about her, which was how I ended up becoming as fascinated as I did with Sophia Tolstoy, because it was again one of those books where she just had a chapter, but I was just like, this is fascinating to me. So what did I do? I went and bought like her diaries and a biography, and like tried to find books where she was a like main focal point. So that's why I do enjoy those types of books in general. They're not going to fulfill all of my history nerd needs, but it helps. It's like a little snack to use Katie's description of historical fiction here. They're a nice little
Just being
snack
able
into
to
a
like
serious history.
airdrop yourself into the period.
Yeah.
One day maybe. when we're able to develop time travel machines. But yeah, no, it's one of the things when I was reading the Gentleman Jack was that I kept thinking in terms of like icons of my hometown of Halifax. If you're going to go for any of the Lister sisters, it would have any of the Lister family. It would have been Anne's sister Marion, who really should be like the person, the icon of the town, because she's the one who's actually living in Halifax while Anne is jetting off here, there, and everywhere, and doesn't seem very interested in her hometown. But because Anne was like the figurehead of the family, and because she has these diaries, there's the evidence, and that's who we build the story around. Whereas Marion like lived in the same place all of her life, and as far as we know didn't leave too much behind. It's mainly what her sister has written about her, which is not very favorable. And just like she found her family quite annoying, aside from her aunt, which is kind of sad, because the more I was reading about it, the more I was like, oh, I want to hear what Marion has to say about this and their relationship.
I loved that she like actually created like a code for writing in her diaries. Because that's just like one of those things. There's just like, I mean, Anne Lister is incredible because she's so highly educated, and she was so fascinated by like the dead languages now, which are like the scholarly languages, then, which wouldn't have been studied by women at that time. But she ends up to kind of, I guess, protect herself in a way, creates like these codes and this, I think she calls it crypt hand or something like that, which is basically like cryptology, but she's writing her diaries in that, so that you have to break the code in order to actually understand what she's written about, which I found really fascinating, that she went to those lengths to kind of protect herself. I feel like she was pretty open about a lot about her life. Like her aunt and uncle seemed to be somewhat aware, maybe not in gory details, but they knew something.
I just like the idea of John Lister, who discovered the diaries and like kind of cracked the code. One of her not her direct descendant, but who inherited Shibden Hall afterwards, like hiding them away when he realized what was in the diaries, but not hiding them so much that nobody could find it. Like, I feel like there's this little gem of that he did want somebody to eventually stumble across it when times might be different and people might be more understanding and accepting of her relationships. I don't know. There's just something in me that thinks like, was he putting on this like show of, oh, terrible, must hide away, but I'm gonna make it still kind of accessible so that somebody could find it. I don't know.
It's like playing hide and seek with like a toddler. Like you go and hide, but you like leave your foot hanging out so that they can see it a little bit, so that it can find you and have that reward of being like, ha, I got you. But yeah, there was something very cheeky about, it's like, oh yes, let's stow this away for now, but someone will eventually find it, and I cracked the code, so someone else will too. But yeah, it's been interesting so far, to kind of see all of that stuff. And so much of like the Regency era, which I know you know a lot about, but me, like my understanding of Regency era was like Jane Austen. So
well, we love that. It's a very fun entry point.
I'm like
one of to actually a place to just live there, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like one of the few, like the minority who are not like complete Jane Austen fangirls, but I did read all of the books because I did take an entire course on Jane Austen, so I did read everything. But I can't say that I was a huge fan, although I did enjoy Pride and Prejudice quite a bit. I don't remember enough of Emma to say whether I like it or not.
Oh, well, Pride and Prejudice is my favorite. So
yeah,
we've got that going.
yes, Pride and Prejudice is fun. The movie adaptations of that one are really fun too.
Oh, have you seen any of the others?
I've seen Sense and Sensibility, the one with Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet. And Alan Rickman is in that one too, if I remember rightly. And it's funny because I'm just like, all of these actors and actresses are far too old to be to be any of these characters. And I'm like, I have to suspend like disbelief a little bit. Because I'm like, no, you're not the right ages, but they're such good actors and actresses. So I'm like, okay, fine. But I have seen that one.
Thompson, you are 19.
Yeah.
But I can't remember if it's like they had to convince her to play it, to play Eleanor. And she was like, but I'm like 35.
Yeah. It's like, guys, we might have a problem here. I haven't seen the new Emma, but it's because I was like, I don't remember. Like, it was one of those where I was like, I don't remember enough about the book, and I felt like I should reread the book, but because like I'm not such a huge Jane Austen fan, I was like, no, it's fine. But at some point, I do need to watch the movie because I've heard good things about the Emma movie. Like, I know so many people love it.
Emma is my second favorite Austen.
Okay.
And I love the 2009 BBC miniseries.
Okay.
There's a film from I think 96. Could be wrong about that, but with Gwyneth Paltrow, which
I think I've seen that one years and years ago.
Yeah, it's one where I'm like, I think it's fine. My mum hated it because she couldn't stand the accent, the Gwyneth Paltrow's English accent, and she turned it off after about 10 minutes, and she was like, "This is not my Emma." And I love the 2020.
Was it 2020?
I think it was early 2020.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful, but obviously because it is a film, they're not able to go into as much, like Pride and Prejudice. They're able to go into a lot more detail over multiple episodes than they are in like an hour and a half, 2 hour film. But it is like beautiful. It's a treat for the eyes.
Yes, that's what I've heard. Everyone who talks about it talks about how beautiful it is to actually watch.
So I recommend both the 2009 and the 2020.
Good to know.
Just be like, Jane Austen, July, go. We will make a fan out of you yet.
Charlotte's gonna convert me. Oh man. But yeah, I'm definitely in a minority with Jane Austen, and I know that. I am aware.
How are you on Brontes?
I love the Brontes. I love them.
There is a tiny part of me as a West Yorkshire native that is like, yes. As long as we've got the Brontes book.
We love the Brontes. It's funny because like I feel like everyone's introduction to the Brontes is Jane Eyre. And that's always been one of my favorite novels. It's probably my most reread novel. But then I discovered like Tenant of Wildfell Hall in 2020, and I was just like, this might dethrone Jane Eyre. And now I'm reading Agnes Grey, obviously, and really enjoying it so far. So that's been interesting. But yeah, I love the Brontes. I also love like the history of that family because I feel like it's so tragic. And I feel like no one ever talks about the brother Branwell, is that his name? I never remember.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, poor Branwell. He's kind of an unlikable character in history, but at the same time, I'm just like, your sisters get all the love, and poor little Branwell. I feel bad. I think the only reason I know about Branwell is watching some ridiculous like Ghost Hunters international show where they visit some place where the Brontes like had some connection, and so they went into the history of the Brontes and bring up Branwell, and that was the first time I ever heard about the brother.
Yeah,
which is
horrible. I think he's someone who had like a lot of potential, and could have been like as great a writer, but then the tragedy of his life. And there is I'd seen there's a book, I think it's called Bronte's Mistress, that's meant to be about Branwell.
Oh, interesting. I mean,
I've only looked at it very briefly, so it might completely off base. Maybe it's not about him, but
I mean, the whole family is kind of tragic though, because they feel like they had so much that I feel like if their lives had been longer, they could have accomplished between like the three sisters, because clearly like the works that we do have from them are phenomenal. So if they had had the opportunity to have longer careers and to produce more than they actually did, it would have been quite something.
Yeah. But I have that for so many so many different figures where they just die so young in their 30s or early 40s, and so much.
Well, I mean, we even talk about like way at the beginning of this, like Mary Wollstonecraft. Like, look at how there could have been a lot more there if she had not died. She died of childbed fever, right? Is that what it was? That's what I thought.
And it was like 10 days as well, so she must have been in agony from that. And it's and also because of the way that she was remembered was because of William Godwin and how he wrote about her. He's just like, God's sake. I think he actually comes across very, very well in I feel like he comes across a lot better in Love and Fury than he does in the nonfiction that I've read about him.
Really? Oh, that's interesting.
Like he's there's this lovely moment in Love and Fury where they're just kind of they know what's coming, and they're just having this lovely moment of like wishing they'd had longer, and like how their relationship came up to here, and he's just like so loving, and you're just like, but you're about to write about your wife in a way that is not going to make her name go down very well for the next 150 years or so until she gets reclaimed.
Yeah.
And people aren't going to talk about her because of what you wrote.
Annoying. Frustrating.
I think he had good intentions, though, I suppose.
We could hope he had good intentions.
Mary.
Oh man. But yeah, there are definitely a lot of those figures, and I think a lot of it, like, being a woman was dangerous. Like throughout so much of history, it, like, childbirth in general, like, was a risky business. So you do have a lot of these women who end up having very short lives in comparison to like women in like the 20th century or even the late 19th century who were able to live to certain ages. So there are quite a few of them over the course of history.
I'm terrified of childbirth now.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like a walk in the park. Like, far from it.
I've been watching This Is Going to Hurt, the TV show adaptation of the book. And watching that, where you're like, modern medicine, but yet so much can go wrong.
Yeah, no.
I don't know if that's one that's coming over your way, but it's very good.
I don't know.
Too.
I like watch Call the Midwife religiously.
Yay!
They haven't. It's annoying because you guys get everything ahead of us when it's BBC, so I have to wait patiently for the new season. But like, even that's in the 50s and 60s, and it's like childbirth can go very, very wrong, as we see.
You are in for a treat with this new season. So
I've been like trying to avoid the spoilers on it, because it's something that I watch, like my Google, when it like gives you news articles that it recommends, like it'll recommend things on Call the Midwife, and I have to like quickly scroll over it so that I don't get any spoilers from like the title, which is also what I had to do with Peaky Blinders. But then I just bought a VPN so that I could watch it. Because it was just like, I can't wait. So I have that next episode to watch tonight as well. But Call the Midwife is very good historical drama if anyone is interested and has not watched it. Because I don't think any of them are based on real figures.
I think just Jenny in the first 3 seasons, and then she leaves, and then it kind of just diverges from.
Yeah, but it's still narrated by Jenny, which I'm just like, this is really, really confusing. But yeah, so because you're right, it is based on memoirs in the first few seasons, or diaries, and then because that actress left the series, they kind of continue on. But it is very interesting, and it brought up a lot of. It deals with history very interestingly, because I mean, it talks about so many different, like, I guess, scientific advances and things like that in the society at the time. So it is very good. I highly recommend it for anyone who hasn't watched it. It's on Netflix in the US.
Yeah, and I highly recommend it on my side as well. And it's one of those shows. It's not. You know, some shows like this is on like season 11, I think now. And by this point, you'd think it would have taken a complete nosedive in quality. But it's just as good, if not better. I think the only thing for this season is that because they've been very much adhering to COVID like space restrictions, and you can tell like they've had to use like angles to make characters look closer than they actually are. And people aren't like holding each other and hugging as much as they would normally be. And that's the only thing that feels like, oh, it would have been nice if they were able to, but I understand why they're not.
Yeah, I think most
focus show.
Yeah, I feel like we're seeing that a lot with stuff that's like been like filmed in the midst of all of this, and I feel like people are kind of forgiving of it because they're like, we understand, like, and filming anything under those circumstances would be very, very difficult.
I'm amazed.
Like I even remember watching, I don't remember what was the play called? I actually bought it. I can't see it from here. But it was Claire Foy and Matt Smith did like this fundraiser where they were acting in this play that they had done together that was like dealing with 21st century issues of like a couple who want to have a kid, but should they have a kid because of global warming and all the humanitarian crises and everything. But they were filming this in the middle of like first lockdown. So they're on stage together, but they're on separate cameras. So it's basically like a Zoom call. Like that's how it looks like when you're watching the performance, because they couldn't actually be within the same, like a certain number of, I guess, meters in the UK. Here it was feet, 6 feet. But yeah, so that was, I think we all understand because we've all been there.
Oh, and I wonder what history things are we getting next?
I don't know. What else we got? What other questions got asked?
So Jenny had asked favorite time period to read about. I think maybe our answers would be the same as we've been.
Yeah.
I'm very big on my Tudors. I get very excited about it. I don't care that I've read a billion things about it. I'll still read a billion more of them. Yep. And the Tudors are one of those things where I'm a very big fan of Greg Jenner and his books and the You're Dead to Me podcast. And he's always talking about like he wishes like there'd be less talking about the Tudors and less like World War stuff. And I'm like, I understand that there is an oversaturation, but to me,
Yeah.
I can never get enough. And
Yeah.
I think the reason that we're oversaturated with Tudor stuff is because it is just so good. And like there's so much drama. And I love the drama. I don't like drama in real life, but in historical fiction or
Keep the
non-fiction,
drama in history.
Yeah. No one can get hurt by me reading a book about, you know, the antics of these Tudor people.
True.
Like they could if it was real life. So
True.
We all have our poisons. The Tudors is mine. Whereas you sway more modern, I think.
Yeah, I definitely sway more modern with some exceptions. Basically 19th century to early 20th century. But like I've dabbled with like the Italian Renaissance was a time period I was really interested in for a while. Tudor history was what really got me into history in the first place. But like things that in recent years I've read more of would definitely be like 19th century onward. But that's just because I feel like a lot of it ends up being about cultural history because that's what I'm drawn to. So it's about how these big moments in history impacted the lives of like the average person. So that to me is always really interesting.
I feel like I'm dipping my toe more into medieval, especially medieval fiction, which I previously hadn't read. I've discovered a little area of books that I seem to not be enjoying, which is medieval set in either a monastery or a convent. I don't seem to enjoy these books. So I've done Her-storyathon, which was 1348 and Black Death coming to England, and it's actually on a monastery. I've done Matrix, which I DNF'd, which was
you DNF'd that one? I've heard so many good things about that.
I was so looking forward to it as well, and I just could not. There's a scene with Empress Matilda where the main character meets her, and that hooked me into it for another 10 pages, and then I got back to it and I was like, I don't actually like this. We're putting it down now.
No.
And then Lear Wife, which was probably my favorite off the three, but still wasn't like my absolute favorite thing. Which was the King Lear retelling.
I have that on my physical TBR.
So yeah, apparently that is my niche of things that I don't like is if it's set at a religious institution. I'm
wondering if I read. I can only think of one, but it was Italian Renaissance in a convent. Sacred Heart, which I enjoyed. I do have, where is it? The Rebel Nun, which is medieval that I'm hoping to read for the Her-storyathon, which is based on the true story of Clotilde, who was this nun that led like a rebellion against the church. So I'm assuming a lot of it is going to be set in a monastery or in some sort of cloistered setting. But I'm very intrigued because I know nothing about this woman and she just sounds awesome. So it's like, take on all the patriarchy that you want. I'm here for it. So yeah, but I think that's the only, I definitely haven't read that many books with that like particular setting, and definitely not medieval.
It's just been weirdly back to back. A lot of things have come out that are that setting.
Yeah. I feel like that happens a lot though. Like there'll be like a thing across multiple books that'll all come out. There's some weird effect. They have a name for it in movies and I can't remember what it's called. But like when we had like A Bug's Life and then Ants that came out at basically the same time. Similar storylines. But
that was that instance was deliberate though, I think.
I think it might have been, but there's some, I forget what it's called, and I don't know what to actually Google to figure it out. But yeah.
That's one of another niche I need to drop into is Disney Renaissance history. And because Ants in A Bug's Life I know is because Jeffrey Katzenberg, who headed up DreamWorks, either got fired or decided to leave Disney, knew that Pixar were doing A Bug's Life and was like, okay, we need to get an Ant movie up very quickly. Get their money from Disney.
Oh man,
that drama I find so funny and so petty. But
it's so petty, but you gotta love it. You gotta love when people do stuff like that. As long as it doesn't impact you, it's just funny to watch.
But there are so many Pixar films, like earlier Pixar films. Sorry, not Pixar, DreamWorks films that you can tell are like meant to be a copy of something that Disney or Pixar were doing at the time. They were like, get it out. Yeah. But no, I find that funny. And Shrek, the first Shrek movie is just such a massive, like, I hate you, Disney. How dare you fire me or make me leave?
Yeah.
I think the make him leave theories that he didn't get a promotion that he wanted. So he was like, fine.
Oh,
you don't want me to be CEO? Then I will leave. Sorry, that's my my Disney tangent for the life.
Love it.
Hey.
So yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think I have discovered my like medieval, my equivalent to the medieval nun or monastery setting that I don't like. I don't think I've discovered it yet. Because I'm thinking, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so.
I think I've just had a string of bad luck with those books. I'm holding out hope
that one of them will be good.
Yeah. Because I had one of my family members was actually a nun, so I have been in convents. They can be all right.
I was friends with a lot of the nuns who taught at my school. I convinced them to get a DVD player. That was fun.
Hey.
Because I started talking about all the classic movies that I would be watching that they grew up with, and they were just like, and I was just like, if you get a DVD player, like you can buy the movies and then you can watch them whenever they want. And then they went and bought a DVD player, which I thought was very, very cute. But yeah, no, it's fun times. I'm like trying to think. I don't have that many medieval books because it's a time period that I kind of dip into. I think the most recent one that I read was Catherine by Anya Seton. But I do have a few that like are on my TBR from that time period that I just haven't gotten around to yet. Which Catherine by Anya Seton was really interesting because I knew nothing about Catherine Swynford and John of Gaunt and that whole thing. And I mean, they're basically the predecessors to like the Beauforts and everyone that goes into the Plantagenets and then eventually the Tudors. But I had not heard anything about them because like focusing on medieval like English history was not something that our curriculum did for sure. So it's like Dark Ages, bad things happen, plague, okay, now we move on to the Tudors.
And then all the medieval historians are like, no!
Yeah, it's like, the plague! That's, I think, literally all I learned about, like, the Middle Ages, is that there was the plague. Spread by rats. There was always a big, like, infographic with rats and how they spread the plague in every single textbook I had.
Sorry, it was just making me think of, have you read Hamnet?
I haven't. I really want to, though, because I feel like as someone who loves Shakespearean, like, plays and things, that would be really interesting. And I've heard good things about it. I don't know why. Like, for whatever reason, I think I'm just intimidated by it. I don't know.
I think
but she has another book.
People are praising a thing. It can be a bit like,
yeah.
Oh, her new one that's coming out.
Yes, which I'm very interested in. I can't remember what it's called. What is it called? I bookmarked it.
It is The Marriage Portrait. I have my anticipated releases little wish list up here.
Yes.
And
that one sounded good.
What is that about?
I'm looking it up.
On the Medicis.
Yes, which is going back to when I dipped my toes into that particular time period and like fangirled over Caterina Sforza. And Catherine de' Medici is also really interesting. But this is one that I think will be fascinating and is about a Her-storyathon type theme with
I did see
Lucrezia
the
de Medici.
yeah, I'd seen it advertised on Instagram, and I thought, you couldn't have published it now? Come on, publishing industry. Watch up to when we're doing our readathons, please.
Yeah, I'm like, keep up. When is it? It's not coming out here until September.
We are 30th of August here, so yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much the same time. But I feel like I should read Hamnet before I read that one, just because.
Yeah. No, there's it just made me think when you were talking the plague and the rats. There's a really kind of out of nowhere a really fantastic chapter where it's basically like how the Black Death had travelled from Alexandria on a flea, and how it made its way over to Stratford upon Avon, and like the different just the flea going from here to the rat, and the rat went from the ship to these people, and these people went here, and slowly over time, well, very quickly actually over time, how it landed in Stratford and has affected the family. And it was just a weird one when you explain it, but like so beautifully done.
Yeah.
And it's like one of my favorite sections of the book.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
When you say it when you just say it, it sounds like what? But it's a very good one to read.
Yeah, no, it's definitely on my list, but I think there's been a little bit of an intimidation factor because of how hyped the book is, and hype tends to scare me away. I'm definitely more comfortable with the books that no one has heard of and reading those, because those are the ones that tend to interest me the most. So,
and I always feel like there's less risk of me being told that I'm wrong about my opinion of a book if less people have read it.
I definitely got over that early because, like, I mean, it was within what? I started my channel in July of 2020, and then like January of 2021, I read Pachenko and Addie LaRue, which I know you love, but I hated both of them. And so in the same video, I was like bad mouthing these two really beloved books. And I was just like, yeah, I'm sorry. I was like, I just had to get over it. I'm sure I lost a few subscribers based on my opinions for both of those. But I had to get over that really fast.
I'm trying to think of one that I've had that for.
I'm trying to think.
I'm sure, like, I know I know there are some books that, like, there are people who love, but like, maybe that's what Matrix is going to become, because everybody loves Matrix and I don't.
Yeah.
No, I didn't like Longbourn by Joe Baker, which was a Pride and Prejudice retelling.
Oh, interesting.
And I really dislike that book, which otherwise I think a lot of people do like it.
Yeah. Is there like is there any sort of like history book or like historical fiction book that has really been like a pan for you? That's like something you can think of?
I'm sure there must be something that I'm like,
because I love hearing people talk about books they like hated, because it's just fun.
And like recently I've become a lot better at just, if I'm not enjoying something, I am just DNFing it.
Yeah, I'm not good at that at all.
Well, I've been really bad at it, but I think also because my TBR pile is a lot longer than I want it to be, so I'm just like, nope.
I'm impressed by the size of your TBR pile, because I'm scared to actually assess what my physical TBR would be. Just because because of how I unhaul books, I like most of the books on my shelves are unread. Like the only books that I keep that are like books that I've read are books that I love. So I'm just like, yeah, I have a lot. It's like hundreds, it feels like, on my physical TBR. But I'm trying to think if there's been one recently
I mean,
that
there was a period of time that I didn't like Wolf Hall, and then I got over that very quickly by actually rereading it. But yeah, there was a time where that wasn't my favorite thing. But I feel like that happened a lot of like my absolute favorite things are things that I initially go into and then don't like the first time and then go back to it because I'm just so intrigued by it, and then I end up loving it. I don't know what that says about me as a person.
I think that's fair. I'm trying to think. I'm like looking, but I probably, to my point, I probably don't own them anymore. So now I need to look through like Storygraph or something. I'm trying to think. I didn't. The thing is like we talked about Philippa Gregory. Like those were books that I originally liked, and then I came to dislike. I think the most recent one would be probably The Lady Elizabeth by Alison Weir, which I didn't like because it's like one of those things we talked about where you understand that fiction writers have to take certain liberties for the sake of narrative in order to create these historical fictions. But there are like certain like plot devices that get used in like period fiction that sometimes I'm just like, is it really necessary? And that was one of them that it was just like, Elizabeth's life is so fascinating. We did not need this there. So that and I don't even know if I panned it. I just didn't. I was like, this is mediocre to me. But that was one that sticks out in my mind.
Now I have that a lot with your Tudor fiction because I just think the Tudor period is so interesting and there's so much intrigue and so much scandal going on. Why do you need to like embellish that or twist it round?
Yeah. And that was how I felt with that one, that it was just a case of like, we didn't need this. We didn't need this particular plot device there, which it kind of was the same thing. Like I felt like it was similar in a way to why I ended up not liking the other Boleyn girl, because it was like there's so much already there that you could like play with, so why did you have to go in that direction? So I feel like it was very similar in my reaction to that.
I have just thought, not of a book but a film that
I'm
not actually a big fan of that I just watched is the first Elizabeth movie with Cate Blanchett. I haven't seen the first one. I have seen The Golden Age, which I know is a ridiculous order, like Elizabeth one. But that one was on Netflix and the first one wasn't. And I just got it and watched it. And but partway through, my housemates came in and were just like, "Oh, let's watch it with you." And by the end of it, I was like, "I am so sorry. This was not good." And it's just I just found it so ridiculous and like it made Elizabeth look ridiculous and like she was completely dependent on like the men in her court and the relationship with Robert Dudley was just so all over the place and it was just a ridiculous film.
See, my favorite of any of the like Elizabeth movies is actually Elizabeth I with Helen Mirren, that it's like an HBO miniseries. That's I think my favorite just because I feel like it makes her out to be the like highly nuanced individual that she was. Like it plays up obviously parts with like Robert Dudley and these different men and like everyone wanting to get her married off and then everyone kind of being like, okay, we kind of give up, and like the intrigue around Mary Queen of Scots and the Spanish Armada. But it's like it's interesting to see all of that kind of in one narrative. So that's always been like my go-to if I want to like watch anything on Elizabeth, just because I do think it's overall a more compelling story. Although I do remember watching Elizabeth with Cate Blanchett years ago and I didn't hate it, but that was also I think before like my version, the one with Helen Mirren that I love, that I've literally watched probably dozens of times, because there will be days where I'll just play it on loop, and can probably recite things, because as we talked about, I'm one of those people that doesn't, oversaturation doesn't happen. If I'm interested in something, I just want all of it. But yeah, so I would have to rewatch them because I don't remember a ton. I just remember Cate Blanchett being really young.
Yeah. This is it. I think it's a very well cast film, and actually, I really I feel like if I was going to watch either of the two films with her in, I would watch the second one, because I feel like the second one knows that it's just a bit of a romp.
Yeah,
and it's not focusing so much on I don't know. I feel like it knows that it didn't get the history right the first time. So we're just going to lean into a bit of ridiculousness, and it's just going to be good fun. Yep. Plus, you've got the actor who plays Sir Walter Raleigh, who is just like a complete hunk, and he plays it up, and he just plays him as like this swaggering pirate, and just like,
yes.
And I'm just like, I enjoy that very much, even if it's not accurate. Whereas this, I feel like they were trying to make it like this biopic, and it wasn't. And like she's just in the middle of, like, she's dancing with Robert. There's this one scene where she's dancing with Robert, and she apparently has just found out that he's married, even though she would have known that anyway.
Yeah.
And that's just a bit of drama. And she's just like shouting at him and like revealing their affair to the entire court. And I was like, this would not have happened. This is not what Elizabeth would have done. Like she was like very private about stuff like that. Like what is happening? But no.
Yeah, no.
Cool costumes. Great costumes.
I'm thinking if there's like a recent movie. I did not really enjoy the Mary Queen of Scots movie.
Oh, interesting.
The one with the most recent one. Like, I thought it was pretty.
Yeah.
But I didn't necessarily, I think because of the Elizabeth, I was just like, I don't like this Elizabeth. Like, once you have a like version of her in your head, as I think with any historical figure that you're like attached to, it's like if someone does not stick or adhere closely to that, you're kind of like, no. So I was not a fan.
I think it's an interesting, it really plays into the insecurity of Elizabeth.
Right.
To kind of make her a foil to Mary. Which I think insecurity was there in her, but she's also like, there's a strength in her that is missing in Mary Queen of Scots, which I think was like a deliberate thing to contrast her, but it doesn't feel true, doesn't ring true. And I feel like all the stuff that I was saying about Mary Queen of Scots was about the fact that there's that meeting scene between the two of them. I don't really care that didn't happen. I think it's like,
I didn't. That didn't bother me.
But I think in terms of like the characterization of both of them was just a bit off. And it's a film that I enjoyed it when I was watching it, but like I tried to rewatch it and it didn't have the same like rewatchability to me. I like, got bored after about like half an hour of it, and I was like, it's done its job for me.
Yeah, it's not a movie I would rewatch. But the thing is that they have a similar scene in Elizabeth I where they have Mary Queen of Scots and Elizabeth I meeting. And it's like this very like cloak and dagger sort of clandestine meeting where like I didn't care that historically it didn't happen because I think it added to the story, but also the two women in that room were both formidable women, which is how I've envisioned both of them. Like, I don't see Elizabeth I going into a situation and being noticeably insecure with her rival there. Like, I don't see her, like, that would make absolutely no sense. Like, she's always been the underdog. So, like, no one was really in her court, so to speak, from the beginning. Like, there were always people who had, like, Mary had claims, her brother had claims. Like, she's a woman monarch in a time when they were just like, no, we need sons. So I'm just like, there were something about the characterization of both of them didn't work for me. And I think it was, and I kind of got it because the movie was about Mary, Queen of Scots. So she's obviously going to be the heroine. And they're going to make her look like the stronger character. But to me, that was one that I was like, okay, I've watched it once. I don't think I need to rewatch it. But I think recent like movies on women from history that I was not totally married to or in support of, that would be it.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
No, I think like you say, if it had been a film that was like called Elizabeth and Mary or Mary and Elizabeth, then there would have been a bit more of an equal focus on both these women. And I think it kind of tried to, but they were so reliant on like Mary as the focal character. She is the person we're meant to root for. And for me, there's so much with Mary Queen of Scots as a historical figure that I'm like, no, I don't always want to be on her side, because I think she made some like very silly choices that I think the film skirts over, like some of the bad decisions that she made in her reign. And that's not like getting Elizabeth off the hook for anything, but
no,
I don't know. I think there's a lot going on for both of them, and they're both very nuanced characters that you can't just there's only so much you can do in a 2-hour film,
right?
So to get that across, but which is why TV shows seem to be getting a lot more. I have a lot more patience for them with them, and I get more excited about them because you do have that build up, and have more of those discussions. You just can't in a film.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, it's just a case of like, it was interesting because I feel like that was one of those movies that had the potential to make a figure like Mary Queen of Scots more part of like popular culture, because it was like you had these two really famous like actresses in it. You had the beautiful costumes. Like it was something that I could see having had the impact of like the other Berlin Girl. But I think that it just didn't hit the mark for everyone. And it's like once it was out of theaters, it was out of sight, out of mind. And so I haven't heard a ton about it since.
Yeah, I want there to be like, I really want there to be something like some historical film or TV show that is like really geared into its history, but that really sweeps people away. And I feel like there hasn't been a massive thing that's like really gotten everyone. And you know, maybe it's something that's coming out soon that's going to do it. I don't know.
Yeah. You need like it's almost like it needs to be kind of as immersive as like what Game of Thrones did, which was, it's like Game of Thrones I really enjoyed except the final season, and I acknowledge its faults when it comes to like portrayal of violence against women in particular and nudity and things like that, but they're like, we can't ignore the fact that sex sells in film, and that has been the case for years. So you have to make something historical seem sexy, because that's what gets people into it, and then all of a sudden people become completely invested. So it's all about making history sexy, in my opinion. That's how you get like the normal, like the general public excited about it, is if there is a lot of drama and intrigue and scandal. Like I think that's why the Tudors end up dominating,
because it's just there. It's just you have to write anything, and it's
just there.
I've been on the lookout for some historical fiction about Matilda, because I just want to see what people write. And I knew that one of the books, which if I am going to do this, I will read it, because I want to like get an idea of how people are writing about her for fiction. But it was part of the conflict between her and Stephen is that they were formerly lovers.
Oh, that's a plot twist.
And I feel like if they ever did a drama about her, that's probably the route that they would go down for the sake of the narrative. Now, I know that they were like second cousins, but you know, in this time period, I guess people did occasionally marry their cousins. But I think they probably ignore that for the sake of a show and a modern audience, and just not acknowledge that. But yeah, that's the way I think that they'd go down it, and it would be like this, like tragic, doomed, like lovers to enemies.
Yes,
that they'd end up doing. And I don't know how I feel about.
I mean, Matilda sounds interesting because I've heard you be so enthusiastic about her, but I'm not gonna lie, like if that was the angle that like a show was pitched to me, I'd be like, oh, okay, I'd be in. So
lovers,
yeah,
and then war.
Yes, lovers and then war seems to be a theme throughout history. But yeah, no, that would be interesting. But I do like that's I think the angles that like all of these period dramas like go. Like let's find like that really intriguing or scandalous element of these characters' lives and like make it like IMAX. Like let's make it huge. Because I'm even thinking, like, have you watched any of like the what's his name fellows shows like Downton Abbey, Belgravia?
I watched both of them actually. But me and my mum, we watched Belgravia during lockdown, and then immediately decided we had to watch Downton to kind of like get the taste of Belgravia out of our mouths.
Yeah,
we just did not like it. We're big Downton fans in my house.
Yeah, we love Downton here in my house. Belgravia was interesting because I feel like they just leaned into certain tropes that were like popular for that era. I like that some of the actors that are in Belgravia and wish they were in more, but I could see that. But it's like that's what these people do. It's like when they're producing a movie or a TV show, it's like let's get the scandal going. Because I'm even thinking of like what was that, the Lady W? That was the
Natalie Dormer.
Yeah, that she did that, which I have the book because isn't it? I think it's Haley Rubenhold wrote the book.
Yeah.
Which I think I had to order from the UK because I don't think I was having luck getting it here. Which that was interesting, but that became like a TV show. But again, like I think it was a limited series, so it's like it came, it conquered, it vanished. Then Harlot, which was also Haley Rubenhold on the Covent Garden Girls or whatever that one was called, which is like that's the stuff that people go for. That's what gets people interested. It's like, oh yes, let's have an entire TV series on harlots in London. So
I need to watch Harlots because I feel like the book itself didn't do too much for me, but I feel like a show.
I devoured that show. Like I had like a long weekend in July, and like the whole point was like, oh, let me go away, like get a little cottage, bring a suitcase of books, read. And so I would read a book and then I would watch like 4 episodes, and I literally finished the entire, I think it's 3 seasons in like a long weekend. I devoured it. It was thoroughly entertaining.
I need to work out where to watch it because I'm not sure. I don't think it's on Netflix here.
It was on Hulu for us. I think it's a Hulu original, so I had to watch it that way.
It might be like one of the Amazon Prime things because I actually think the Great season 2. It's not aired on TV here, but it is on Amazon.
Interesting.
So it might be one of those.
Yeah. So those were good, and I mean, I do like I read the 5. Which I thought was interesting, but it wasn't. I think I gave it like 4 or 4.5 stars. Like it wasn't a 5-star read for me. But that was again something that was really interesting, as far as like a historical standpoint, like taking the victims of Jack the Ripper and actually giving them back sort of lives in a way of retelling them and trying to get rid of some of that. The historical inaccuracies that were sort of thrown at them over the course of the last few centuries because of the circumstances of their death. So that was interesting to me, and is good because it is not about royal ladies, which we've talked about a lot of royal ladies. But that was interesting. So I'm definitely trying to read more of Haley Rubenhold's books because I do think she does a good job from what I see about taking these lesser known figures and kind of making them really captivating.
Yeah, I think for me, Haley Rubenhold, it's always, for me, it's really interesting topics, but I don't always love her writing.
That's fair.
But the subject will like pull me through.
Get you through, yeah.
So I think for me, it was like Covent Garden Ladies, absolutely fascinating topic, but like I say, I didn't always love how she wrote it. And then The Five, and then Scandalous Lady W. And I think that was because she was focusing really just on like this couple and their experiences, and because it was so like focused in, I really enjoyed that.
That's fair.
My favorite is one about a lady and not about a regular woman.
I have it somewhere. And then I have another book that I feel like it's going to be really interesting called The Duchess Countess, which I think it just came out here. But that to me seems like it would be an interesting book to pair with The Scandalous Lady W, because it's, where is it? So it's this one here. But it's about Elizabeth Chudley, the Duchess of Kingston. And you might like it because it's Georgian England, but basically she ends up like committing bigamy. And so that's how she becomes both a duchess and a countess. And it's like the woman that Becky Sharp is kind of based on, if you've ever read Vanity Fair. So I'm very intrigued, but it just came out here. But I do feel like kind of these scandalous ladies in the nobility in England, like it could be a really interesting book. But I do think it'll pair nicely with Lady W, because I think both of them end up being in court. So fascinating.
18th century is just filled, especially like later Georgian period, just filled with all of these scandals, and they are very, very juicy.
Yes. I feel like no one gives the Georgian time period enough credit because it is a interesting era, but I feel like it's one of those eras that no one really focuses a ton on.
I feel like for us, I think we talk about the 18th century in terms of the Industrial Revolution, and not much more about the goings on. Whereas I feel like at uni there was more option to learn about it, and one of my modules was on the representation of women in the 18th century.
Oh, interesting.
Which is what got me into it. Where it had originally just stemmed from an interest in the Duchess movie with Keira Knightley. Like, it's such a pretty movie, and I found her as a figure very interesting. What else can I learn about this?
Yeah, we definitely don't cover it at like Industrial Revolution. It's weird. It's like there's certain subjects across the periods, but you don't, I guess, based on the curriculum, like you don't necessarily have a ton of time to go in detail with any of those eras. It's just kind of like giving you a glancing understanding so that you understand how it impacts the next section that you're going to talk about. And it's really not until college that I could really like sink my teeth into any one particular time or sort of subject. So
I am thinking about it though. I'm thinking like, oh, the 1760s to the 1800s. I wonder why it is we're not focusing quite so much on that. And I think it does go back to a lot of the history that we do study and that is on our curriculum is stuff that will make us look slightly better as a country.
Yeah.
What's happening? What are the multiple bad things that England are doing during the 18th century that we don't really want to talk about, and also instances where we maybe possibly are losing wars of independence against other countries. There's a lot in the 18th century.
That's literally and it's funny because we wouldn't even consider that like the Georgian era. Like it would just be the American Revolution, and like that kind of encapsulates everything that led to the revolution itself, and then independence. So it's really funny because like Georgian would not be classified that way here, even though that's what it is. But yeah.
Well, I feel that hello. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can only apologize on behalf of the United Kingdom, for there are a lot of very, very, very bad things. And and I do think our curriculum just try and focus. And I think there's a lot of conversation at the moment about only focusing on the more palatable things, which is
I think everywhere is kind of does the same thing. Like I feel like different countries focus.
You don't learn anything if you don't learn about the bad stuff.
Oh, I agree, but I think that's what has always been done is like you focus on the history that sheds a kinder light on your history, and the rest of it is kind of just ignored or glossed over. So
but then I'm really interested in all the conversations that have been sprung up over the past couple of years about that, and especially there's a massive conversation about statues and what statues mean to us, and what we are prizing by having the statues of, for example, slaveholders, and I think it's a really important and very interesting conversation. I'm glad it's coming up more, but the backlash against that conversation is what just infuriates me. But that is maybe a conversation for another time.
Yes,
I know it's one that we could go into. But yes, I think for me, we're coming up to tea time.
Yes, you should go have tea.
There's no doubt.
Oh, geez. And you need to go watch Peaky Blinders.
But I've loved having this discussion with you.
Me too.
And I know that there's so much more that we can discuss. So we're definitely going to have to do another one at some point soon.
For sure. Anytime.
But I'm hungry. As my mum would say, a hungry Horace. And I do need to get my food.
Go get food. Yeah, it's lunchtime for me. It's actually a little past lunchtime, so that's what I'm going to do next.
Yeah. That's the one thing to keep booktubers away from our lives is food.
It's true.
But thank you to everybody who has popped on and said hello. It's been really, really a very fun conversation, and I'm hoping that everybody's enjoying the Her-storyathon and getting to learn read more about these very fascinating women. And I'm just compiling like a very long TBR list of things to read after this is done. I don't need any more encouragement to buy books, but I'm having a very good time with this.
Yes, me too. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And like I said, if you're not subscribed to the lovely Charlotte, please subscribe.
And vice versa, if you are not subscribed. This is the wrong way. If you're not subscribed. Gave me 2 degrees, but I can't tell which way to do.
Yeah.
Go subscribe to Brittany because she is fantastic and a lot more eloquent than I am about.
Oh no, I ramble. That's a lie. I ramble so much.
Okay. So yes, I hope you are all having fantastic Sundays, ends of your Sunday, and look forward to talking to you about our group book, which that will be our next our live will be on the 3rd of April.
I believe so.
It's same time.
First Sunday of April, whatever that day is.
Yes. And that will be on what is in the UK, Rebel Women by Rosalind Miles.
And what in the US is The Women's History of the Modern World.
It is the same book. I did check the Amazon preview to make sure we were getting the exact same information. So yes, I'm very much looking forward to that and hearing more of your thoughts, and and hearing more about everything else that everybody's reading.
All right, everyone. Bye.